Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. It is Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. And this is, once again, the Jeff Gerstmann Show. It's a podcast about video games hosted by, this week I'm here. It's me, Jeff Gerstmann. Hello. Welcome. Thanks for coming on through. We've got a variety of video game related topics to discuss. It's a big week around these parts. It's my daughter's birthday party is coming up here pretty soon. You have to get a lot of permits, turns out, when you want to have a party in a park. And at no point does the park guarantee, like, it's not going to be 100 degrees. In fact, they'll probably tell you the exact opposite. So, we have a bunch of, we got a bouncy castle and all this stuff. We'll see if anyone shows up that'll be like, it's too hot. That's always the fear, right? I don't know. So my wife's been working on getting that all set up and so on and so forth, and she's turning 4, and she's been the Mario Kart has been kind of in and out. She's been back and she's back on it a little bit. The new update just came out, Wave 5 of Mario Kart DLC just dropped like last week, and with it brought some new characters. Wiggler is back, which is very exciting. For me, I'm very excited that Wiggler is back. She insists that I play as PD Piranha when she sets it up. She'll set it all up and then be like, "Now it's your turn." And I'll be like, I don't. Okay, yeah, all right. So I've played, like, I'm gonna say I have played more Mario Kart over the last 2 months than I have played over the last 20 years. Maybe more. 20 years is what, 2003? So I'm going to actually say maybe even 25 years. Basically, to exclude that when the first Mario Kart came out, we played quite a bit of it, me and some friends. But other than that, has just never really stuck with it. So yeah, so I am so we're she's just passing me the Switch. The Switch Lite is actually like a really perfect size for kids. It's neat for that. Like, it was just like, this is kind of a cool device. It's like pretty durable, not a lot of moving parts, all of that. I will say that the system interface is a little too easy to navigate for children. Whoever decided to be like, well, if you want to unlock the Switch, you just need to hit the same button 3 times. It can be any button. You just got to hit it 3 times in a row. Like, that's what kids do. They pick a button and mash on it over and over again. My son, who is not even 2 yet, can and did last night, in fact, unlock that Switch. And anyway, Mario Kart was already running, and so he, with the auto steering and the auto driving, my 2-year-old, he was able to play Mario Kart, quote unquote. There's like one new track in the DLC that's like a level lord style level. It's like a giant, or it's either a giant bathroom or a normal sized bathroom, and the people in the Mario Karts are tiny. You be the judge. The squeaky clean sprint, I believe that might be the only actually new track. They release them 8 at a time when they put out these waves of DLC, as far as I can tell. And the overwhelming majority of them are just tracks from other Mario Kart games. This most recent batch, a lot of them come from the phone game that got shut down, right? I don't know that is still running. Anyway, no one ever saw those tracks, and they're all based on cities. So it's like, here's Greece and here's Vancouver and everything. You're like, no, Rainbow Road. What are we talking about here? I don't want Vancouver. Give me something fantastical. Fucking Vancouver. But I don't know. The tracks are whatever. The tracks are all whatever in Mario Kart, as far as I'm concerned. Except for this, I think the squeaky clean sprint one, which is the level lord style giant bathroom. At least that's like clever. You're like, oh, look at this. We're having fun. But it reminded me of Ridge Racer in a really sad way. Because those, the last handful of Ridge Racer games did that same thing where they just kind of fell back on tracks from previous games and had very few brand new tracks of their own. It was just like, here's Ridge Racer 7. It's pretty much Ridge Racer 6, but it's, I don't know, the turbo works a little different, or, Ridge Racer 6 is a collection of a lot of tracks. And then those PSP games, they're awesome, in terms of like bringing all of those tracks together into one game. And, a lot of the music from the early games makes its way into some of those as well. And that's really neat. But, at the time I remember thinking like, man, like this series seems done. This series seems done because they can't even be bothered to come up with new content. They're just like, here's like, whatever. We know no one, like, it's a mix of no one played the early Ridge Racer games, who's playing them now, and also the people who are excited for the nostalgia of old tracks, which I don't know that I fit into either category super cleanly there. I just like new fancy stuff. Yeah, that last Wipeout game was kind of the same way, where it's just like, here's a bunch of tracks from that other Wipeout game, and you're like, no, that's okay. So what you're telling me is that this franchise doesn't deserve full new development in your eyes. That's where I'm at with it. And that's Mario Kart 8 is not quite in that camp, right? Because now it has a zillion tracks in it, new and old, or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. They've got one more wave of DLC to release this calendar year, and I guess maybe then they can release a new Switch. Once they've fulfilled their obligation to releasing 6 waves of DLC over the course of, and yes, it is well warranted, because if you look at the sales of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the Switch version, it is, I don't have the number in front of me, but it is like one of the best selling games Nintendo makes. Like at an alarming clip where you're like, whoa, holy smoke. Like it is crazy how many copies of Mario Kart 8 they have sold. Yeah, somewhere around 50 million, 60 million, yeah, somewhere just tens of millions of copies of this fucking miserable video game. I would love, yes, this is my hope, my secret dark hope is that when the new Nintendo hardware comes out, they wait about a year after launch, and then they're like, hey, here's Mario Kart 8 Super Deluxe. We've got another year of DLC planned. Oh, that would be amazing. If they were just like, yep, there you go. But yeah, I don't know. That I think that game is pretty, like I think the tracks look nice. It's got a good sense of speed to it. I think it's just a miserable video game. And I've felt that way about, the overwhelming majority of Mario Kart games, but this is the one I've played most of since the 90s. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's just yuck. Yeah, there's been a few different Mario Kart 9 rumors kicking around for a while where they're like, oh, it's going to be a big departure, or oh, it's going to have way more Nintendo characters in it, so it'll be more of a Smash Brothers style cast as opposed to just the Mario universe, which Link is in it now, so that kind of holds true to a certain extent. I just spilled this all over myself. Like a child. I just spilled this drink all over myself. Ugh. Yeah, I don't know. It's been interesting seeing, like, she's getting, like, her play sessions with Mario Kart are getting shorter and shorter because, like, she'll just be playing. it's it's her disappointment voice, where she'll play it for a while. She'll be like, I want to play Mario Kart. And I'm like, here you go. I'll set it up. She'll go, no, I know how to set it up. I'm like, okay, you set it up. And then she'll play it for a couple races. And half the time be like, I don't want to play Mario Kart anymore. I'm like, yeah, I get it. Neither do I. And so she has found her way into the, I guess, is it called the Nintendo channel? It's like the news section on the Switch, and you can go in there and there are a bunch of trailers and all of this other stuff. I've mentioned this before, but like she's spending all of her time watching whatever they're putting up there. And you know, when they announced Super Mario RPG, she watched that thing over and over again. That trailer. I'm trying to think what else. Like, she watches the Mario Kart trailers a lot, which is weird. Like, because you can find the trailers for all the old ones. So she's watching like the Wave 2 DLC, you know, Mario Kart trailer. And I have some feedback for Nintendo. The trailer for Wave 5 is broken on their on the eShop. Like, it stutters and skips in a way that none of the other trailers do, which is weird. But yeah, she's watching. She watched the I did, you know, because I'll look away. I'm not like always sitting with her while she's using it. And she found her way to the Super Mario movie trailer, and she watched that, and then she said Bowser was mean to the Mario Kart people, and we were talking about it yesterday, where she was like, she's tentative about seeing the movie, where she's like, she kind of wants to see it, but she's like, it looks like it's a little scary. I'm like, yeah, you know, Bowser's not actually a nice guy. He doesn't just drive with everybody. He's a kidnapper. He's a murderer. He turned all the citizens of, well, maybe Mario is the murderer. I mean, didn't he? You know, he turned all the citizens of the Mushroom Kingdom into blocks and stuff, didn't he? I mean, you know, he's a bad man. But then Mario was the one that broke all those blocks. I mean, that's bad, right? But yeah, it's interesting watching her, you know, navigate that stuff. And then my son watches her and is picking up all sorts of bad habits, because, you know, she's at a pretty tantrumy age right now. And he got his hands last night when he woke up pretty much every hour on the hour all night long, which has been made for an interesting morning around these parts. He got his hands on the Switch and then just immediately knew where the power button was, and just like went and turned it on, and then mashed on a button to unlock it, and then he was in there playing Mario Kart at 1:00 in the morning. I was like, that's bad. That's bad. So yeah, I don't know. It's I have a respect for the Switch Lite that I did not have before, because, you know, you'll feel it. It's just like, this thing feels kind of crummy. The controllers can't come off, so there's a lot of games that you can't play, or not a lot, but there are some games that you can't play on it. The size of the screen makes me crazy, but, you know, but in their hands, you see it and you go like, oh yeah. We had a 4th of July. Well, I'm not going to call it a party. We got a barbecue. We grilled some meats, you know, and some of my wife's friends came over and brought their kids, and, you know, it was the first time I'd seen the kids in a while, and the kid brought his Switch over, the older one, and so he eventually just pulled it out, and he's like, check out my headphones, and he's like showing all the stuff to me. I'm like, sick, bro. And he's got his USB headset with voice chat and all this stuff, and he immediately I think he was tethering it to the phone, because I didn't give him the Wi-Fi password. I mean, I would have, but, you know, he didn't ask. I don't know if tethering it to his mom's phone. I don't know how he was getting internet on this thing, but he just kind of sat in the backyard at a certain point playing Fortnite on the Switch. with the headset on, plugged in, using it, because you can do that in Fortnite. It's like game specific or whatever, as to what supports the the USB headsets as opposed to the Nintendo phone app and all that other stuff. Super Raven says, does anyone else have a guest Wi-Fi? Hell no. I just bought a new router and set it up. I didn't, and disabled guest Wi-Fi. I'm like, absolutely not. No guest Wi-Fi. Hell no. People are going to drive by, connect to my guest Wi-Fi, start torrenting hardcore pornography, and then I'm going to get a letter in the mail. We can't have that. The default router for some ISPs like have a hotspot for subscribers that you can. Well, it's just terrible, Though I guess that does give you some kind of plausible deniability, I suppose, if you're like, whatever it is. I don't know. So yeah, I don't know. He played a bunch of Fortnite, and then he asked me, he's like, hey, let's be Switch friends. And so I went through the process of like locally adding someone to the Switch, of like you push the heart, the card suit symbol and go through this process that, you can just search locally for other Switches. And I was like, all right, whatever, man. Cool, let's do it. And like, I saw like, I don't really use that. I mean, pretty much the only Switch action happening here is my daughter playing Mario Kart. So like, let's be Switch friends, but like, I'm not, I don't really use it all that much. Anyway, so I added him, and then I looked at his profile. He has played, according to the Switch statistics, over 650 hours of Fortnite. I didn't know that the Switch counted that high. I was like, whoa, holy smokes. He asked me for my Fortnite name, and I told him I didn't have one. I realized then I did, because it's probably just my Epic login or something. But I was like, yeah, I don't really play. I just don't really play Fortnite. So I don't really have I don't. And then I realized like, oh, I probably, my Epic login or whatever it is probably what they're having people create there on the Switch is an Epic login. But yeah, I don't know. He was having a good old time. He was voice chatting to people the whole time. My son wandered up to him and started hitting him on the knee at one point, and he just didn't even look up. He was just so in it. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. You got to be in it. So anyway, I don't know. It's been a fun couple of weeks. But yeah. Got some stuff over to the storage locker. Progress in the garage continues slowly. Turns out it's hard to do anything ever. When you got a couple of kids and one more on the way and all that stuff, you're like, I don't, this originally it was like, oh, maybe we could get half this garage cleaned out before. They're like, nah, man, there ain't no time for that. There's so much other stuff going on. So much other stuff going on, like video games that I have been playing. This left a heck of a first impression. I'm going to play some more of it, and maybe I'll stream some more of it. I don't think this has a release date just yet. It just says coming soon on Steam, but I played some Xenotilt, which is the follow-up to Demon's Tilt. I got my hands on a build of that. Demon's Tilt is cool. If you haven't played it, it is kind of a spiritual successor to the, Devil's Crush, Aliens Crush style pinball game. But it is manic. It is, Demon's Tilt. There is so much going on. It is so full of action. It is so wild. That it is that kind of like Devil's Crush turned up to 1,000 kind of, it's a wild thing. But Demon's Tilt is a hell of a game. It's not always easy to figure out what is going on in Demon's Tilt. That's kind of the one thing that's held me back from playing way more of it. So I got my hands on a copy of Xenotilt, which is on Steam, and that's again, I think it's going to launch in early. Looking at the Steam page, it looks like it will launch into early access, but it does not have a date on there at all yet. It just has an early access kind of header, and it just says coming soon below it. So if Demon's Tilt is Devil's Crush, then Xenotilt is Alien Crush, but they also bill it as Xenotilt : hostile pinball action, which is a heck of a subtitle. Wow. And it is very much in the same vein. Obviously it's aliens instead of devils, much like the compile / Naxat, Taxan, whatever, games of yore. Xenotilt is kind of an alien sort of thing. They have done some stuff. It has this feature that when I was reading, because when the gentleman who sent me the code was telling me a little bit about it, and I was like, okay, that sounds weird. But in practice, I'm like, oh, fuck. So when you have the ball stalled on your flipper, you hold the flipper up and the ball will just kind of sit there. You can nudge down. You can nudge like you're nudging a pinball table to move the ball around. If you nudge down while the pinball is balanced on your flipper, turrets will pop out and start shooting at targets. Like you can basically, like because there's all this shit flying around the play field and barriers in your way and whatever else. But if you can just stall that ball, and if you have ammo, you can just pop these turrets out and they will automatically just gun down a bunch of stuff in front of you and kind of open up the way. And it's such a cool, powerful feeling to just be like, no, fuck this. Because they just come out and go, and then you shoot the ball up through. It's really fucking neat. And I think the game is far more readable so far. And again, the game's not out yet, so maybe they'll layer on like a billion different effects and whatever. But I went through and turned on all the effects that it had in the menu, VHS filters and RGB. It's a great look. And just found like the rules of the table and different aspects like that to just be much easier to sort out than Demon's Tilt. It just seems like a much more readable experience overall, which I thought was pretty cool. So yeah, I'll probably stream some of that here, maybe tomorrow, and let you take a look at it. But it's so far, I mean, if you liked Demon's Tilt at all, I think you're really gonna like this whenever it does launch. I don't know that they have a date for it yet to actually be out, but I do have a copy of it right now. It's cool as heck. On Friday, Exoprimal came out. Played a chunk of that. And then played a little bit more of it over the weekend out of just I guess you would have to call it a professional curiosity at this point. Exoprimal is such a strange... I like it specifically for... I don't think it's a very good game. I think it is repetitive. I think the core of it is a little hollow. And I think that a lot of the different suits and stuff have abilities that I just don't want to enjoy. I don't want to play, rather. And I do not enjoy them, from messing around with them. It's like, none of these are fun. But games like this don't exist anymore. We talk about B games. We talk about, which is, I think the B game thing gets used in a negative way a lot of the time. But like, it's a genre game. It's a much like a genre film. When we talk about how movies sometimes feel like that the variety in movies has thinned out, I think that's debatable. But I think the variety in big expensive video games has maybe lessened a bit over the years, you know, as we kind of enter this era of like the biggest AAA big budget games going from taking 2 years to taking 5 to taking 7 to, you know, whatever the numbers end up being, you know, the budgets that go into those games, like you end up in a situation where you're trying to make something that, I guess I would say you're trying to make a game that has to appeal to 100% of that console's ownership to you know, to really break through, right? You know, or not, you know, that, but like it has to be something for everyone. And we don't see a lot of games these days made by major publishers. You know, indies, obviously, you know, they're like smaller publishers are doing more and better and more variety and crazier things over the years than they ever have before. So like, I'm not saying that like gaming ain't like it used to, you know, I'm merely saying that like from the major publishers, many of them have decided to place these big bets instead of making a wider variety of smaller bets across a lot of different genres. You know what I mean? And so you end up with, I think that's how you end up with like the Ubisoft formulaic open world game where you're just like, this is stealth, but it doesn't have to be. It's why, you know, like you end up with those sorts of things of like, you can kind of play this any way you want, which the end result is just like, if you want to get through it fast, just shoot everyone in the head. If you want to take forever and go slow and stealthy, you can. The bonuses for it are not really worth it. But if that's what turns your crank, buddy, we kind of put that in there. You know, like it's sort of a, you know, the games have to kind of reach a wide number of people. And so they can't be like, you know, these kind of more niche experiences are harder to come by from major publishers. And so it's weird that Capcom put this out because this feels like, again, a very narrow focused thing. Like, I don't think the thing they're focusing on is especially great because the thing they're focusing on is a multiplayer 5v5 game. It only really has one mode. The mode, you know, the missions inside of those modes change ever so slightly over time. But generally speaking, you're going in, you're doing a series of missions, and then randomly you can select this if you desire. But by default, it is it is more of a random thing where at the end it's decided if the final objective is either you continuing to do PvE stuff or maybe the enemy team is there and you get to shoot them directly. And you don't really find that out until the end if you stick on the default setting. But that's it. There's really just kind of the one mode and a few places in that mode where it can vary. And there's no pure single player. At no point can you pause that game. At no point can you pause that game, even in the tutorial. But it is sort of like the it is sort of like the mode in Destiny. It is sort of like, is it Gambit? Man, it is Gambit. That is what it's called, right? Yes, Gambit mode. Man, I've been talking about this for the last several days with various people and never once blanking on the term Gambit, but here we are. It is very similar to that in that you are kind of two teams doing things separately. Occasionally you can go take control of an enemy and bring it over to the enemy side and attack them directly. In this case, it's dinosaurs. In this case, all of the enemies are dinosaurs. And so the game creates this amazing visual of this big watery ball in the sky that then 60 fucking raptors just fall out of it and come running at you. And you're like, it's a great, cool look. It's a great moment in a game that is otherwise very plain. And as you play it, you will unlock additional cutscenes and it will tell a story. The story so far is really ridiculous, but yeah, I think that, you know, you do kind of encounter as you play more of it, you encounter different mission types inside the game. Like, but early on, almost all of them are just like, all right, get to this next checkpoint, and it's like, you should shoot all the dinosaurs, and you're like, that's what I've been doing at every checkpoint. There are eventually there's some more variety there, but yeah, it's a very strange thing. It's a very strange thing. And I like that about it, like it's got a really, you can, again, you can kind of go to the Gambit stuff in Destiny. I think there's a lot of stuff about the way they built the robots in that game that feels a lot like Overwatch in terms of like, oh, okay, this is a support role and it has this and this is the ult, and it's a hero shooter. You've got abilities, you've got an ult, when it charges up. Like it's kind of, they're going for that. So yeah, it's just a weird thing, and and they're launching it at full price. It's on Game Pass, which kind of mutes that a little bit, but as a $60 game where you just kind of play the same thing over and over again and hope that eventually you get to the point where something different unlocks, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. And I don't think that the action is good enough to really make me want to drag myself through the same maps and areas and mission types over and over again to get to the point where it's like, oh, we've unlocked another mission type in here. It's the same basic concept as a gameplay mode as to who wins and who loses, but we've ratcheted up the difficulty to this, and the changes they make to it don't seem like it's that big of a deal. So it's just sort of a weird product, in this day and age. Like, here's this kind of derivative, like you see the inspirations from across a handful of different games, like even the way they've crammed story into a multiplayer game feels like Titanfall 1. You see little bits of Overwatch in there, you see quite a bit of Destiny's Gambit mode in there, and it's just sort of a strange amalgamation of this stuff in a way that, like, Capcom isn't making games like this anymore. So it's a really strange product to just like kind of exist, and it's not necessarily awful. It's just the sort of thing that I think when you look at it as a full-fledged, full-priced product that also has a lot of different cosmetics that you can purchase and a battle pass and all of that on top of it, you kind of look at it and go like, this doesn't seem like it's worth it at all for this. For this amount of money, for this, it really just has this very shallow feel. And so I don't know, like, but at the same time, it's nice to have something that feels, again, even as it is largely derivative of a handful of different games, like to have it come out and feel like it's like, this had some budget to it. You did something with some cutscenes. You can see some spots where they've tried to cut some corners and maybe like, not go full hog, full on some things that, would start to get expensive, like some of the cutscenes or whatever else, just cinematics and map variety, map size, map, like everything there, but it's, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a situation where like anyone on a platform where they would have to pay money for it, like PlayStation, and I guess that's kind of it. If you're on PlayStation, don't pay $60 for a copy of Exoprimal. It does not seem worth that amount of money. It is on Game Pass on both PC and Xbox, and so for that, we end up back in this quandary, right, of like, this is like kind of a middling game at best. And how many of those can Game Pass support? It's great when they can say, look at this day one launch on Game Pass. This game, those rubes on the PlayStation got to pay $60 for this thing. Not you. You chose intelligently. Blah, 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 blah. But like when a lot of their day one launches come in and they're like this, like what's the great example of that? It's, you know, because I look at like Crackdown 3, that's kind of one of the early ones that I remember of just like yuck, this game is bad, but at least it's on Game Pass. And I think that like I don't know how many more times you can say that before it starts to reflect really poorly on Game Pass. You know what I mean? You're just like, hey, you should have better quality games on here. And I know that these are third-party games and you can't go out there and regulate quality out of your third-party developers. But when the marquee game for your service this week is Exoprimal, it's just never a good look. I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird. That's. But again, it lets people play this thing without having to go and purchase it. And so, like, I would say if you are just, again, I will probably load that game up a couple more times. Again, like, there's almost a professional curiosity that I have about it where I'm like, surely it can't just be this, right? Surely there's got to be more, you know, and it sounds like that, you know, I as I've seen some of the variety it tries to layer on, but not all of it. But it sounds like that once you get there, it's not that different from what you've been doing all along. And so it's like, okay, well, yeah. How's the story compared to stuff like Resident Evil? I mean, it's not really comparable to that, I would say. Exoprimal's story is like you play these multiplayer missions, and then as you go through them, you will uncover logs of a sort. Then the logs will go onto a big board where you're trying to solve the mystery of how you escape. And so you will see little, you know, mostly non-animated cutscenes, just talking heads at the bottom, watching a piece of file footage or looking at something and going like, wow, we're stuck in a time loop, or, you know, whatever the shit is. But like the setting of the game is almost even more ridiculous because it feels like this very needless, like, I don't get why you. So you're what, you know, hey, it's the future and corporations rule everything, and you work for a corporation and you wear robot suits and fight dinosaurs. There are dinosaur invasions. Why are they happening? I don't know. Maybe we'll get to the bottom of that by the end of the game. But like, you're flying around this island where something bad happened 3 years ago. Your corporation owns the island, I guess, and they were researching something and something blew up. So you've been flying around this island, making sure that nothing gets in or out, or, you know, trying to get close enough to figure it out. There's a rogue AI there that is shut down the island, basically. You get caught in some kind of weather event and you crash land on the island. And the AI gets you. You're the only person on your crew that can pilot the robot suit. Everyone else is just there to hang out and, I guess, fix the robot suit. And then the AI says, we're trying to research better exosuits. And so I need to put you in war games so we can test out the exosuits. So you need to be in these war games. And in these war games, you will fight dinosaurs. Also, by the way, these war games take place 3 years ago. So you're going to travel back in time 3 years to be on this island before the event that caused it to fall apart happened, which doesn't look any, it looks like the same island, but slightly less fucked up, but still kind of fucked up. And that's it. Traveling back in time 3 years is like, it's the most needless time travel. Like, just from a premise perspective, you're like, it's just another layer of just like, this didn't need to be a time travel game. You could have just crash landed on the island and the AI could have been like, we're testing the suits. And now because there's a bunch of interdimensional, because they're also, okay. So not only are you traveling back in time 3 years, but because it's a 5v5 game, they're taking all these other pilots from different dimensions, and they're all being teleported back to that time as well. And and then you get a communication device that you can use to communicate with a guy who's in another dimension, and he's got the same. I think the eventual realization will be like, these are all different versions of you, or something. But you have, this one of the guys on his crew is the same as the guy on your crew, except he's got an eye patch. Literally the fucking most fucking multiverse fucking, like, give Spock a fucking goatee type shit that you could fucking come up with. It's just like this story. I mean, and again, it's nonsense, but like, at least it's got that. At least it's got some brand of fucking ridiculous where you're like, why did you do this? Like, I guess you had to do something, but like, this is, you made some weird choices here. I don't know. It's it's a very strange product, top to bottom. But as I spend more time with it, I have at least come around on like its ridiculousness, and like, I don't think it's a good game, but I think it's a weird game. At least in the periphery, kind of around the edges of it, it's a very strange thing. What you're doing is as fucking straight on, like, walk to this point, a bunch of dinosaurs will spawn, fucking shoot them. When you're done, walk to the next point so more dinosaurs can spawn. And that's roughly it. The objectives will change up here and there, but it is you going somewhere, shooting dinosaurs to defend a thing or just to clear them out or whatever it is, and then you move forward to the next thing. Like, from that perspective, I don't think it's much fun at all. I think it really falls flat in the execution. And so, again, it's just kind of whatever on that front. So maybe it needed to have all of this weird shit around the edges, because without it, you would realize like there's nothing here. Maybe it's just like this story is this jingling of keys. You just go like, oh, what is? Oh, 3 years in time. What? That's stupid. All right. Let's see the stupid. Let's look at this stupid thing. And so I've been looking at this stupid thing. That's Exoprimal. I don't know. I streamed a bunch of it. You can go look at it on YouTube if you want. And then I've been playing more Diablo 4. I'm gonna check out because their first season starts in a couple of days here, and so I have been kind of finishing off a lot of the easy stuff. Like, you go and get all these statues, and like a lot of it's kind of busy work, but I've been making it less busy work, because you have to walk around the zone and get all these statues. And when you get the statues, they improve stats on every character you have, even the new ones that you will create in this season mode that's coming up here. And so there's a benefit to you to go do this busy work. But I've been trying to do that busy work in conjunction with a bunch of other side quests and a bunch of other like world event type things, like the Hell Tide and everything else. And so it's been, instead of just riding my horse or teleporting around the map to get all this stuff, I've been walking it and walking around and killing a lot of stuff and unlocking and getting a bunch of Hell Tide shards that then you use to open these chests that give you better items. And I've been getting some pretty solid items, and I am having a good time with Diablo 4. I don't know. I think Diablo 4 has a number of issues that I wish. I think I wish it had a wider variety, because I think it is, when you get to the end game stuff, I think it is very easy to start to burn out on it. There's just a lot of side quests I haven't done yet, and so at least there's a lot of content I have not done. But the things that unlock as you finish the game, and they're like, now you can do this, like you can go fight a world boss. Like, I went to go fight a world boss. People were like, oh, have you done a world boss yet? You need to go check out a world boss. I'm like, all right, I'll go kill a world boss. Let's see this world boss. I get there. It's like, hey, man, look at this open hole in the ground. A world boss is going to spawn out of this in like 6 minutes. Like, okay. I'm going to stand here with about 8 other players, and we're going to just do emotes at each other for 6 minutes, and then this thing is going to come out of the ground, and we're going to fucking fight it. Hopefully it's cool. And then it pops out of the ground, and it's just a boss from the campaign. It's just a 4-legged creature that just, it's big, and it runs around and covers a lot of ground, so you kind of have to keep up with it as you're fighting it. And you're like, yeah, no, I did this fight before. I did it alone, in fact, last time. So yeah. So we beat up on this weird fucking dog demon, whatever the fuck it is, and then I got some items, and I think one of them was better than what I was using, but that was very frustrating, just from a level of repetition. I think that game is unfortunate. Again, on the end game stuff, and I think it's going to create that situation that we love to laugh at, but I think it does. There are situations like this that are real, just maybe not as dramatic as people like to do. It's that situation where someone says, "I played this game for 3,000 hours and I hate it." And you're like, no, you played it for 3,000 hours. Why did you play it for 3,000 hours if you hated it? Like, this game has a lot of really good stuff in it, but when they try to make it a game and try to do things that keep you coming back, I think the things they have built so far that are designed to keep you coming back are not worth it. And so you get through this campaign, you get to the end game, you do all, you're like, all right, now what? You're like, there's another dungeon here, and that was a fun dungeon, and then now we're in World Tier 3 and we're doing fun, hey, cool. I'm getting better gear. I'm having a good, the difficulty feels rebalanced in a way that's making the game way more fun than it was before, just from a pure combat perspective. And that's honestly, I think the only reason I've been sticking with it is because I think the gameplay is just more engaging at this difficulty level. It is in some ways easier and in some ways harder, I guess I would say, but you get to a point where you start to feel your build, I guess. You're like, oh, okay, I need to play, the abilities I chose are synergistic in these ways, and I am going to do just fine as long as I kind of play them that way. And I chose that. I'm not out there using I didn't go to some web page and go, how do I spend my skill points? What's the best build for barbarians or whatever that horse shit is? So I have to give it credit there. I just kind of picked the things that I liked that seemed like they would work well together. And it does not match the fucking here's the best build bullshit all over the internet. But there are abilities that I like to use, and there are abilities that work well together. And that is the thing that has kept me coming back, is I think just the raw gameplay. Let me hit this stuff, let me get cool legendary abilities that do different weird shit, and let me imprint those onto my items so that I can kind of create, kind of even better synergies between these abilities and so on and so forth. That stuff is pretty well done. Again, it could use more of it, but that's the stuff you look at and go well, by the time they're done supporting Diablo IV, there will be way more of this shit. That's the bread and butter stuff that with every update, they'll be like, we put a bunch of new items in the game. I don't know. or hey, there's a bunch of new aspects. So there's a bunch of new this, there's a bunch of the, those would be the sorts of things that they will, of course, add on to as they go. It's just the kind of overall trappings of what you're doing. I mean, once you try to think of it as something larger than just I'm smashing skeletons and the numbers come out of them. Once you start to look at no, but what am I really doing? I think a lot of Diablo 4's endgame stuff kind of falls flat. And so I'm going to take a look at the season stuff. The season stuff in Diablo 3 did not grab me at all, but I'm gonna get ready for the season. I'm gonna start a character for the season and try to see how it goes, and see if it grabs me in a different way, and see if it's something that makes me want to keep playing. And if it doesn't, that's probably it for me in Diablo 4. Because I think I will probably hit a wall somewhere around there if that season stuff does not change things up dramatically. Or at least add on a bunch of meaningful new content, I suppose, is the actual thing there. that's pretty much it. Been messing with my Steam Deck. I think I'm going to format my Steam Deck. I think that in the past year or so of fucking with my Steam Deck and trying to run a bunch of people's other weird scripts that are just like, here's a good way to make your Xbox Game Pass stuff, and here's how to make the streaming stuff work, and this script will do it all for you. And then you run the script and you're like, this doesn't work at all. And also it added 9 entries to my Steam library that don't work in any way, shape, or form. Did you install files all over my Steam Deck now in a way that doesn't fucking work at all? Or what? And so I think and now I'm having a situation where when I reboot my Steam Deck, it does not reboot. Does not reliably reboot. I'm having to hold the button down to forcibly power it down and then hit the button again to turn it back on, because it kind of locks up on restart. So I'm thinking I will format it and maybe not run people's, I think EmuDeck is maybe the one kind of like script type thing that I would run. But a lot of this other stuff, like people were like, oh, this is the best way to install non-Steam launchers. And I think it's called non-Steam launchers. And I ran that and I was like, this is fucking terrible. Or again, this has installed a bunch of things that straight up don't work. And I already had BattleNet installed. So I did that manually. I don't need a script to do that. So I don't know, just some funky shit like that. The stuff that the stuff that I did to my Steam Deck to make it work the way I want it to work is relatively easy to do again. It's stuff like I need to turn on the ability to SSH into it and also to FTP into it to copy files and so on and so forth. And so I kind of just need to do that and install, at this point, BattleNet. I have like the Uplay launcher installed and I have the Epic launcher installed, but I'm not currently playing any games from those, so I probably won't rush to reinstall that stuff. It's easy to do so. And there's other stuff like Lutris or the Heroic game launcher that if you want to go down that road, you can do that too. But in my experience, I don't know that you necessarily need to use those. It's relatively easy to just install that stuff pseudo manually and set it up yourself. So that's probably what I will do. I got an SD card full of old games and I'll just keep that as is. And when on the other side of emulators getting installed, I can just kind of throw that card back in there and be good to go again. But yeah. Yes, Count Marcula says, I just use Lutris and Heroic for all that stuff. I did not have... I was using Heroic for the Epic launcher for a while, and did not need that. And even EmuDeck, the script that installs all the emulators, is like they want you to run that stuff a very specific way that is not at all how I want to run it. Like they're like, use this emulation station front end. I'm like, that thing's a fucking piece of shit. It's absolute garbage. Fuck you. No, absolutely not. I will not run that thing. Just let me run RetroArch. RetroArch has its problems, but I'm well aware of its problems at this point. I've been using it long enough that I just want to use that for most things. And for the other games, I will just launch the emulators directly, because most of them have game lists and other things that let you just very quickly and easily launch a game. Whereas these big fancy, look at this very fancy front end. It's like, yeah, it's like, I don't know, kind of jittery and fucking, use the Steam ROM manager to scan in all your games. Like, no. Fucking no. Do you know how many games I'm putting onto this SD card? I do not want to sit here and watch it fucking sit and do jack shit for fucking, Anyway. A lot of that stuff is easy to do by hand. I will probably not do the emulator stuff by hand, but that script is so robust that you can configure it pretty well as you're running it to be like, nope, don't install this shit. Do not install this. Don't do this. We don't need it. And you can keep it from fucking up your stuff. Most of the time. Anyway, so that's probably my, you know, well, I don't know. Once my daughter's birthday is done and we're on the other side of all the party stuff and so on and so forth, then that's maybe my project for one of these nights, is to completely wipe the Steam Deck and start over again. We'll see. Why don't we get into the news? I got a button for that. There it is. Games with gold. One of the worst perks, I guess, of Xbox's paid services over the last handful of years here. Games with Gold is finally going away, as is Xbox Live Gold. This feels like something that has been, you know, like it's maybe needed to happen for a long time. Like the Xbox subscription services have seemed weird for a while. As Game Pass came out and as Game Pass continued to grow, the existence of another service that was just like, here's Xbox Live Gold. Do you remember back from the Xbox 360 days? And Xbox 360 or Xbox Live Gold lets you play online on console. And also, they eventually added this Games with Gold thing, which is like the monthly free games thing, this thing that Sony still does on the PlayStation side. But in an era when Game Pass exists and they're out there having a team focus on deals to get games on Game Pass and blah, 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 to then probably have other people or another effort to like focus on like, we need to have free games on Games with Gold every month. It just you didn't need both. It didn't make sense to have both. And so the games on Games with Gold felt like they were getting worse and worse and worse over time. And it felt like a mishmash of services in a way that you're just like, this doesn't make any sense. And finally, they eventually had Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which combined all of the features of all of their subscription stuff. It's like, okay, here you get Game Pass for PC, you get Game Pass for console, and you get to do the Xbox Live Gold stuff as well. They tried at one point of like raising the price of Xbox Live Gold in a move that was not met met with joy when they did it, and so they kind of backed off of some of that stuff. But that felt like them heading down this path. Maybe they just did it a little too early for people, or did not find a way that made it seem palatable to folks. And so what they are doing in September is they are rolling out something called Xbox Game Pass Core. This will be the replacement for Xbox Live Gold, and it is roughly equivalent, except for the Games with Gold part of the service. Game Pass Core will let you play games online, which is still a weird, just in this day and age, especially when that's not a requirement on PC, because obviously they can't get away with doing that. But to still have a barrier where you're like, well, if you want to play, and they must make a good chunk of money from people who just want to play games online against people. Otherwise they would get rid of it. And so we have Xbox Game Pass Core. And so this lets you, the way they phrase it, who is this written by? This is written by Corporate Vice President of Gaming Marketing, Jarrett West. Words that can only be typed out by someone in marketing. Game Pass Core will give players access to our advanced multiplayer network. Just, you can play games online. It's not, you don't need to, it's our advanced multiplayer network. Are you saying that on the PC side it's not advanced and that's why you have to charge for it here? Because all those same services are pretty much available on PC and you don't have to pay for it there. So It's a really weird distinction. It's an increasingly weird distinction when they try to say you need to pay us a monthly fee or an annual fee, a fee, to play games online. You will also get a select collection of over 25 games to play with friends around the world and exclusive member deals, all for $10 a month or $60 a year. I don't think $10 a month is a really, like, the $120 a year is a really bad price for this. $60 a year, much more reasonable. I think you would be better off going up to one of the other Game Pass tiers personally, but, you know, for some people, $60 a year is the right amount of money to spend, I suppose. So they've announced a handful of games here that will be part of the offering. Let's see. Our launch collection of more than 25 titles from Xbox Game Studios, Bethesda, and our content partners will offer something for everyone to play on their Xbox Series X Pipe S and Xbox One consoles. They will add new titles to this list 2 or 3 times a year, which makes me wonder if that means games will go away also, or if they will only add. They don't say rotate. They don't say new titles will rotate in 2-3 times a year. They say new titles will be added 2 or 3 times a year. Here's the list of games that they have confirmed so far. It's not a full list of the September launch, but here it is. Among Us, Descenders, Dishonored 2, Doom Eternal, Fable Anniversary, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, Forza Horizon 4, Gears 5, Grounded, Halo 5, Halo Wars 2, Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, Human Fall Flat, Inside, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, Psychonauts 2, State of Decay 2, and the Elder Scrolls Online Tamriel Unlimited. So you get access to all of those games if you are part of the core service. That's a decent list of games, I would say. I would say every single one of these games is better than most of the games that have been offered on Games with Gold lately. So in that kind of specific view, I think that this is a pretty solid list of stuff you'll get. And then so they're kind of breaking it down here and they break it down as monthlies, and so, you know, it's kind of when you compare the monthly fees, it gets a little ridiculous here, because for $9.99 a month, you will have Xbox Game Pass Core. But for $10.99 a month, for $1 additional per month, you could get Game Pass for Xbox. So if you only play games on Xbox, you don't have a PC, for $1 more per month, and I don't know how the annuals break down, but again, you know, the discount on, you know, you're basically paying half price if you are getting the annual version of Core. Wait a minute. As I'm looking at this list here, maybe this is not as simple as an upgrade. Okay, so the bullet points here for console Game Pass: hundreds of high quality games on console, new games on day one, member deals and discounts. But that does not include online console multiplayer. Man. What a fucking frustrating situation. Like, just, I know we're talking about an advanced multiplayer network here, but include it with every tier of service where, you know, except for the PC one, obviously, but like, just, ugh. So this then means, and I do think that the benefits you get for this price point are actually worth it. So it's not all bad, but I think that you know, both of these lower priced options are compromised in ways that like leave you feeling like you're just like, man, fuck this. So really the only change here is that they have dropped the Xbox Live Gold branding for Xbox Game Pass Core, and instead of doing games with gold on a monthly basis, they are giving you this chunk of games. The 25, the catalog of 25, over 25 high quality games on console. So that is really the only difference. Then, of course, if you want Game Pass on PC, that is $9.99 a month. And with that, you get hundreds of high-quality games on PC. This is their language, not mine. New games on day one, member deals and discounts, and an EA Play membership. So if you only play games on PC and you want to have access to Microsoft's first-party stuff and you'd like to have that tier of the EA Play membership, which... that's a good chunk of games right there for $10 a month. Like that, of these subscription services, when you look at like, you Play Connect or Ubisoft Plus or whatever the fuck they're calling it, or like Luna, that's a pretty solid offering for $10 a month. But if you're on console and you want to have access to Game Pass and to play video games online, then really the only tier for you is Ultimate, which is, again, none of these tiers are changing. It is really just that low tier, the gold thing that is changing. And so at Ultimate, you are getting hundreds of high quality games on console, PC, and cloud. New games on day one, member deals, discounts, and perks, online console multiplayer, and an EA Play membership. These higher tiers do lose the games with gold, but again, I think those games with gold have been pretty low tier lately in a way that's you are technically missing out on a feature you did have before, but you're not. I don't think that's a meaningful loss, is what I'll say there. So yeah, if you're on console, you're probably better off buying Ultimate, and then that still has an annual fee that is lower. Again, we're talking about the monthly charges here, because Ultimate is $17 a month. Don't pay that. And I believe they did bring back the $1 promotion for Xbox Game Pass in conjunction with this change. I think that kind of slowly wormed its way back out there. So, but they will, that won't last forever, and all the loopholes on conversion will eventually change, and whatever else. So, and then so if you got your games with gold, you will keep access to those as long as you are a Game Pass Core or Game Pass Ultimate member. If you drop Core but keep console Game Pass, you will lose access to your games with gold. Ugh. This seems like something that should have just been... I wish they would have bit the bullet a little bit more on this and just said, yeah, fuck it, man. Multiplayer should be free, and still have something on related to this core offering around like access to games and whatever else. But like, I don't know. That's a hard one to walk away from, because I think there are generations of people who are just used to that being the law of the land, right? Since the Xbox 360, since PlayStation Plus became PlayStation Plus, really. That has been the situation, is if you are a console player, you have to pay the tax to play on these advanced multiplayer networks. Well, one of them is an advanced multiplayer network. I don't see Sony talking about their advanced multiplayer network. Anyway, so, I'm sure that is a lot of money that is very hard to walk away from. I think it's very easy to look at it as, I would be interested if we could, hey, why don't we run a poll in the chat, if you don't mind. I can't, I don't have time to type it out, but like, I'm curious to know how many people just have Ultimate. Because I feel like having like that is the sane, like the sane price point if you play a lot of games. And I think a lot of these folks, a lot of people listening to the show, if you if you don't have an Xbox, then you would probably say like, oh, well, I could have PC or I could have nothing. But if you have an Xbox, do you just have Ultimate? Because that seems like the way to go. You know, that seems like at some point you would have done the weird conversion loophole a while back and been like, hey, I'm just riding with this. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe if you play games in the cloud a lot, then maybe Ultimate is still good for you, even if you don't have an Xbox. But yeah, I'm kind of curious about this poll here where it's running. Only vote if you have an Xbox. Early numbers seem to be skewing towards yes on the Ultimate thing. But I think that's, you know, again, I think that people that are listening to this podcast, especially people dedicated enough to listen to it live, are not the general public. We are all fucking way far down this rabbit hole, you know? And so we're probably a little more likely to know about and care about stuff like Game Pass Ultimate. Whereas like a lot of people out on the streets are just like, I just want to play Call of Duty with my brother. He's in college. And then, so I just bought this one. And then they never think about like, oh, well, I could play all these EA games. I could play this. I could play that. You know, it's just like, whatever. They don't care about it. They're not as knowledgeable. They are not as clued in. They are not as tapped in. Yes. Tapped in. That fun phrase. But probably, yeah, like, is this stuff common knowledge? I don't really know. The Xbox offerings and which one's the best and which, you know, what you actually get and what the value is. Like, it must be really hard to convey to people that are just like getting an Xbox. I mean, they're probably getting a PlayStation, honestly, if we're looking at the numbers. That's probably the first problem that Microsoft runs into, is that these people are buying a PlayStation and then going, what? But like trying to convey to them that like, hey, you can get access to all these games. And they're like, I don't want all these games. I want to play NBA and I want to play Call of Duty. And that's it. So yeah, getting the wider audience to understand the value. If you have an Xbox, do you have Ultimate? Comes in, yes, comes in at 72%. No comes in at 28%, that's about how I figured it would go. But yeah, it's a change that they've needed to make for a long time. It's just they just kind of didn't actually change anything. But you know, the games with gold stuff has been kind of a running joke for a little bit now. So at least this solves that for them. But these are all games that I don't know. Yeah, I was going to say, you know, if you just paid Ultimate, you would probably get all of those games on top of a bunch of other stuff. So I don't know. Whatever. This is they probably also have to look at it as like, how do we walk people through understanding the concept of a subscription-based game library? And they're like, well, at the lowest tier, you still get these 25 games. And so then that gives them a point where they like sort of a pivot point where they can go like, hey, you like these 25 games? What if you had another 150? Or I don't know what the number is, you know. If you paid us this much more, we'll convert your core membership into an Ultimate membership for, you know, a benefit rate, you know, give people a kind of one-time upgrade, you know, bonus and all of that other shit, and go from there. A lot of changes on the Microsoft side of things. You know, it's not just the Microsoft Activision acquisition stuff, but that more of that did happen. The FTC lost its initial court case. They thought about, you know, filing an extension or filing an appeal rather. Meanwhile, in the UK, Microsoft and the CMA have agreed to a 2-month extension on their deadline. This is according to Eurogamer. And that, let's see here. So there's been a joint request from both Microsoft and the UK's Competition and Markets Authority to try to get an extension here. And they're extending that deadline from July 18th to August 29th. And that stay of litigation will help them kind of basically come to terms on, hey, how are we going to make this work? And that's what we were talking about a little bit last week, along the lines of like, oh, maybe they'll make some change to some part of their offering, or spin out some part of the company into its own LLC or PLC, or whatever, UK stuff, to make that stuff seem like it makes sense that just seems like a foregone conclusion almost, that they will find a way to make that over the line. In the US, it seems like that the FTC's ability to appeal will get in the, has the potential to get in the way, but not stop the deal outright. And also, a lot of people in the wake of that FTC thing said, hey, that means this deal is probably going to close any day now. Today is the day that the deal was supposed to have closed. July 18th was the break date in the contract when they agreed to, when Microsoft agreed to purchase the company. It was like, okay, if this deal is not done by the 18th of July, then we get to go do something else. Bloomberg is reporting that that deadline has been extended, that Activision and Microsoft have apparently agreed to a new deadline to prevent that $3 billion breakup fee from coming into. They're so close to getting it over the line from the looks of things, but it doesn't sound like that they're just going to rush it out and be like, all right, we're done. Which is what I think a lot of people thought was going to happen, that like yesterday, we would see a press release saying like, deal's closed, all done. Instead, they're going to not quite take their time, but they are going to give themselves a little bit more time to get that stuff done. And I don't know if that has anything to do with the stuff with the CMA, or sort of the some of the other kind of competitive conversations that have been happening. But that seems like where that stuff stands. Phil Spencer got online and let people know that the 10-year agreement to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation has been signed by Sony. That deal has been talked about for months and months and months as something that Microsoft has been offering, and Sony had just not signed it, and now they have signed it. He said, "We are pleased to announce that Microsoft and PlayStation have signed a binding agreement to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation following the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. We look forward to a future where players globally have more choice to play their favorite games." Steven Totillo, according to this Video Games Chronicle article, got word from Sony that it is a 10-year deal. And we'll see. But at this point, if Sony's signed off on it, and, here in the US, it seems like the FTC was going to try to make its case, but probably never actually win it. Largely because of the concessions that Microsoft already made in other parts of the world. This sort of thing kind of will make its way through. I don't see, it doesn't seem like there's any major blockers here that are going to prevent this from happening. It's interesting because, there was like some listing on some Brazilian listing claiming that Diablo IV was coming to Game Pass. And everyone's in a real weird boat with that shit right now, right? Because I think it was Rod Ferguson, or, someone on the Diablo side on the Diablo team had to get out there and be like, nope, not happening. Diablo 4 is not coming to Game Pass. Which is absolutely factually accurate right now. But, right? I mean, as soon as this deal closes, there's not a lot of reason, and I don't view that as him lying, but it is kind of like, hey, we don't that deal could blow up tomorrow, right? So I think that is a factual statement. Diablo 4 is not coming to Game Pass, but as soon as that deal closes, everything changes, right? And so then you would think that Diablo 4 would very much come to Game Pass, and And at least on console, PC maybe is a little bit weirder to work out because, the BattleNet client, like okay, so PC games on Game Pass have to be have to launch through that Xbox app and do all that same shit, right? So re-engineering the PC version of Diablo 4 to make it something that didn't need the BattleNet client installed to run, that might be a lot harder to do. And that might take some time, but the console version, the Xbox version, already has all of its BattleNet tie-in and everything else. All they have to do is grant people access to it, to being able to download and run the game, same way they would with any other game, I think. But on PC, that might be a weirder process for them to go through. They'll just have to do it. I mean, it's not, I don't think that that's a deal breaker, obviously, but it is a situation that they probably have not done yet. Whereas they have figured out a way to make, say, EA Play subscriptions exist in conjunction with your Microsoft membership and whatever else, right? But right now, they have not done that work for BattleNet, and I wonder if they do it that way. Do they end up doing it in a situation where they keep the BattleNet launcher? God, I hope they don't. I would love, and this will be a real clusterfuck if they decide to do it, I would love for everything about BattleNet to go away and just be rolled into the Xbox Live stuff. Names, the storefront, all of that shit. You don't need it, man. One less launcher. Roll all that stuff into the Microsoft shit, which some people might rather it go the other way if they don't like the Microsoft stuff. But I don't know. We'll see how all of that goes. But yeah, I'm guessing that stuff would be not tricky, but that's something that engineers would have to spend time on. Even if they're not merging BattleNet into Xbox Live, you still have to do the whole thing of like, okay, how do we launch Diablo 4 how do we launch any of these Activision PC games on, or I guess Blizzard specifically, but how do we launch them on a system that does not have the BattleNet client installed? And they'll have to engineer some kind of shim or something that sits in the middle, and maybe in the background they'll be creating dummy BattleNet accounts for people that don't already have them, and for people that do, they'll link them together, or whatever it ends up being. But they'll have to figure out some kind of solution there. For Call of Duty and some of this other stuff that already exists on Steam, that's probably actually a lot easier because they've already done all that work to make it run on something that does not have BattleNet there. So it'll really be stuff like, Diablo 4, presumably 3. Presumably they go back into the back catalog and do this, but I imagine that means they'll have to touch all of these old games or come up with some kind of universal solution or something that works on the back end. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not an engineer, but that seems like something they would have to figure out. Yeah, will World of Warcraft end up on Steam? That's a good question. Will they start selling World of Warcraft on Steam? World of Warcraft presumably eventually goes into the Xbox app in some way, shape, or form, I would think. But World of Warcraft is a launcher unto itself, isn't it? Or did they roll all of that into BattleNet in a smooth way? I don't know. And when I played World of Warcraft, there was no BattleNet. We had to have a separate launcher for WoW. But yeah. I wonder how all of they'll do, and I wonder how much time people have spent thinking about those issues. It's the sort of thing that, like, I wonder, because I'm thinking about like the stuff that we went through the last time we got acquired. It's a very different situation, obviously, in terms of technical shit, right? But when you're acquiring something that has its own user base with their own names and there's this tempting feeling to like, we want to merge all the logins and give everybody the same name, and and really fuck up a lot of things for a lot of communities. Like GameFAQs. When we fucked up GameFAQs, we fucked it up real bad. We really did a number on GameFAQs back in the day when we decided to merge the GameFAQs and GameSpot users all together. It was a motherfucker. And also, the GameFAQs people were not happy about it. And so basically anyone with like a GameSpot looking username, or, you know, like a username that looked like it came from GameSpot, I guess, like got treated really shittily on GameFAQs for a good long time. I don't know. That was a long time ago. Whatever. It all worked out in the end, I guess. Maybe. Ugh. Yuck. Anyway, let's see. It looks like this year's Call of Duty game is going to be Modern Warfare 3. Check it. Sission says, check in on the GameFAQs forums. It's been so long. I was never a GameFAQs forums user, which is part of why when it came time to make decisions about the GameFAQs user base and the forums and all that stuff, it was very easy for me to be like, fucking who cares? Like, merge them. Like, what? Why are we even having this conversation? If they keep posting ASCII Luigi's, just fucking ban them. Who fucking cares? These people are selling drugs on the message boards. Like, what? Ban them. Just ban them. Who cares? That did happen once. Call of Duty, this year's Call of Duty has started to leak ever so slightly, and some of the DMCA requests have included the phrase Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, and people have locked into that. As some of the leaks have been posted to Twitter, they've been receiving things that say reported content, video, audio, visual recording, description of infringement, leaked content from unreleased video game Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. The name had not been really confirmed out there, but these DMCA strikes seem to imply that that is what they're going to call this year's game. I guess that makes sense. I just think about Modern Warfare 3 as largely being a fucking bummer qualitatively, and also just, you know, just the quality of that campaign, the quality of the multiplayer, and all of that sort of stuff. So I guess I would call myself ever so slightly surprised that they are going to use the name Modern Warfare 3, as it does not have the cachet that Modern Warfare and Modern Warfare 2 did. But that appears to be the direction that they are going in for this year's game. Activision got out of the Call of Duty account on Twitter.com, which was a like a micro blogging service of note back in the early 2000s. They have posted something that says, let's get this out of the way. Should Modern Warfare 2 operators, weapons, and bundles carry forward into Call of Duty 2023? And they put it up as a poll. And both the answers are yes, variants of yes. So looks like your purchases from the previous year's game will carry forward, which makes sense considering the game is, you know, something that seemed to have started as DLC for Modern Warfare 2, that of course that this stuff would carry forward. Little bits and pieces from the leaks, I guess, in this Video Games Chronicle article. The upcoming sequel will also reportedly feature the return of the classic minimap and the ninja perk, with perks categorized into different pieces of gear, including gloves, helmets, and boots. So I don't know. That's the last time they did anything that involved you equipping things like gear, like gloves, helmets, and boots, was Advanced Warfare, when you were unlocking a ton of weird gear. It didn't have stats on it per se. You would get set bonuses in some cases. But yeah, citing this is again from videogameschronicle.com, your source for video game news. Citing people familiar with the project, it claimed Activision's goal for the new Call of Duty was to make a game that feels like a standalone full price release and also an extension of Modern Warfare 2. It's a weird line to straddle. We'll see how they get on with it. They'll have to reveal that game here pretty soon. While we're on the topic of Call of Duty, apparently there was some fix on the Microsoft end that fixed a lot of matchmaking issues that they had on the Xbox 360 stuff. So I guess at some point over the years, I did not know that this was the case, but like, I guess it makes sense because of how matchmaking has been on some of those older 360 games over the years. But apparently Microsoft has issued some kind of fix that has fixed a lot of old Call of Duty games like Black Ops 2. I fired up Black Ops 2 last night after seeing this story and immediately got into a game. There were like 50 different games running from the looks of things. And Charlie Intel reported that Modern Warfare 3, the original one, had over 7,000 players active because matchmaking works again. Video Games Chronicle lists out the following games as being playable on Xbox Series consoles via backwards compatibility. That's Call of Duty 2, 3, 4, World at War, Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops, Modern Warfare 3, Black Ops 2, Ghosts, and Advanced Warfare. Of course, Ghosts and Advanced Warfare also came out on, Xbox One. So, if you're going to play those, you would probably play those. And that's kind of cool that the older games are working again. Of course, there are a lot of hackers out there with modded 360s playing some of those older Call of Duty games. So one of the games I played last night, we were playing, and then mid-match, it just loaded up Nuketown. I was running and shooting, and then suddenly a loading screen appeared, and it loaded up Nuketown, and then suddenly we were in Nuketown. And one of the team's icons constantly appeared in the lower left corner for the rest of the game. I don't know. People have made all kinds of weird shit with hacked Xbox 360s and weird mods. As an additional benefit here, it's not just Call of Duty. Apparently Shadowrun works again, which is fucking crazy. Remember Shadowrun, the game with the tree? You plant your healing tree and fucking do your thing. Apparently you can play that game online again because the fixes that they have deployed have also made the matchmaking work better in Shadowrun. And apparently this, I think a lot of this Call of Duty fix is because the Shadowrun community reached out to Microsoft and said, hey, this problem is preventing us from playing the game. Could you fix it? Apparently they did. And now you can. Shadowrun. I did not like Shadowrun, but I loved the idea of Shadowrun. Video Games Chronicle reports that there's a Discord community of over 2,000 people in that are dedicated to Shadowrun. That game also came out on PC. It was one of the early Games for Windows Live games, if I remember correctly. I don't know if that version will also benefit from this, but I wonder. But yeah, kind of a weird, fun twist here to be like, oh man, cool. They fixed Shadowrun, and then a bunch of other games work better now as a result. There's a quote here from a member of the community in this Video Games Chronicle article. That says it actually kind of works better than it had ever worked in the history of the game being up, which is kind of shocking. So yeah, if you've got a copy of Shadowrun and you've got an Xbox, I guess Series X, I guess it is backwards compatible, right? Anyway. Check out some Shadowrun, I guess. Yeah, let's see if we can get those Tony Hawk servers fixed next. Just a lot of changes at Microsoft. Larry Herb, you may know him better as Major Nelson, has announced that he is departing Xbox after 22 years. That's a run right there. That is a run. Major Nelson was for a very long time the face of the brand. He was, he had a radio background, and so he has been, in the podcasting game for shit, man, probably just about as long as I have, if not a little longer. But yeah, he's stepping away from the company. He said, after 20 incredible years, I've decided to take a step back and work on the next chapter of my career. As I take a moment and think about all we have done together, I want to thank the millions of gamers around the world who have included me as part of their lives. Also, thanks to the Xbox team members for trusting me to have a direct dialogue with our customers. The future is bright for Xbox, and as a gamer, I'm excited to see the evolution. Yeah, I mean, for a long time, Major Nelson was out there posting here are the sales and deals on Xbox this week. Here's this, he's still was running his own separate blog with that stuff. And, over the years, for the longest time, he was the only thing they had. And he was like quite literally the public face of that brand. He's one of the first like corporate face of a brand out there in kind of a community sense, giving the news directly to users who were then taking it directly from a company as opposed to going to the media. A lot of other companies would go on to follow suit in a variety of ways and try to do this. And now they're all a little bit faceless. I don't know, like Ubisoft has their editorial team, like Chris Waters is still there doing stuff, hosting pre-show E3 conferences and whatever else. Like companies certainly still do have their kind of hosts and things in there. But like he was delivering news directly from Xbox to users and not going through the middleman of the filthy press, the filthy media. They might say something negative about these deals. So in a way, he is kind of the face, one of the early faces of that changing of the guard, of how coverage of video games changed in some ways for the worse. But that's not his fault. I think he did an amazing job there at establishing that at a time when that didn't exist, like finding a way for that to exist, having that podcast, working with E for all those years, like all of the stuff they did, was in a lot of ways very revolutionary for the game industry. And they kind of created a blueprint for how that stuff should work. And different companies have taken that in different directions, one way or the other over the years. One of the things I remember hearing, this is a kind of like another nasty thing about the early days of Xbox One is I remember there being like, cause they were building a TV like set up in LA. Like they were trying to build Xbox Studios or whatever it was in Los Angeles, and they were going to try to produce a bunch of content down there. And I think that included a lot of like, that was like when they were like, oh, we're going to make a Halo TV show, which obviously they eventually did. But around that time, I remember hearing a lot of stuff like that there was like a push, and I don't know, this was never something that I heard like super verified, but it was, I remember hearing that at that time there was a push to get Major Nelson out and not have him be the face of stuff anymore, because there was a feeling of just like, we need to hip it up. We need to youth it up. We need to, this needs to be a little blah, blah, blah. And, and get, I don't know, a bunch of douchebags talking on camera instead of like Major Nelson actually was that dude. And so he was actually someone who was there doing, and it felt like it was more coming from a source as opposed to coming from a host who got some shit to read from corporate, and now they're just like, and next week is blah 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 blah. And so, you know, it was kind of like one more of the things around the, when I think about the days of Xbox One and I think about what their ambitions were for like creating a new video product and creating a new video offering of like, here's the deals, here's the this, here's the that, instead of the, you know, kind of This Week in Xbox stuff that Major Nelson did for all those years, that there was some kind of weird push, or I remember hearing that there was some kind of weird push to kind of push him out. And I think that you know, that obviously didn't happen. I think over the years they've tried to put different people in some of those positions, and I feel like many of them have just lacked authenticity. Because he's that guy and he's been there for a long time. And so, you know, like you don't replace him with some, you know, this now I have to imagine, you know, like they've got other people that work around, you know, work with him and, you know, work in community roles and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know what I don't know what they end up doing. It probably just ends up like, hey, now we just post stuff on you know, news on Xbox Wire. I don't know. What if they just made a new Major Nelson? That'd be ridiculous. That'd be dumb. But like, what if they took like Will Tuttle and just said, Will Tuttle, you're the new Major. Like when they made a new Sushi X, like when EGM had to name someone else Sushi X over the years, maybe they just say like, all right, Tuttle, you're the new Major Nelson. That'd be terrible. That'd be funny, but that'd be terrible. Congratulations to Larry Herb for making it out for 22 years. That is again a crazy run. That's a very long one. And like I said, revolutionary in a lot of ways. Not, you know, they've done that kind of direct information, and it's stuff that I always wonder why they don't do more of it. And they've and why Sony isn't better at it also. It's been funny with my daughter playing around with the Switch. I actually feel that like the Nintendo Switch front end trailer feed and like news feed for new announcements, I think is actually maybe the best one. But I always felt that like, you know, and this was a sort of thing that like over the years I was like, I got mad about it in a way that I was like, why the fuck? Like people turn on their television and turn on a console and they're sitting there in front of their fucking TVs. Like, why don't you have a video show where you're interviewing developers? And they do these one-off pieces and they do little bits and bits, but they've never promoted it well. They've, you know, as they've tried this stuff, it's never been like hits you in the face. Like it should be a situation where like you can turn on your Xbox and like you got two fucking tiles right there. You got the fucking game you played most recently, and then here's what's new. And it's a, you know, 10-minute, 15-minute, whatever video show that then spawns off to longer deep dive interviews if you want to get deep on some of this stuff. Like produce all that content. Like you've got almost a captive audience right there. So there was times over the years, this usually coincide when I was like most frustrated also with like fucking how things were going where I was at the time. But there were times where I was just like, God damn it. I should go fucking work for Sony or work for fucking Microsoft and go fucking solve this problem for them because it's crazy. But the thing I feel like I've learned since then is that the front page of the console, the front door, whatever you want to call it, I don't know what they actually refer to it, but like all of that space is for sale. And so they'd much rather have like download the Overwatch 2 demo in that spot than like, hey, here's our video show showing you everything that's coming out in an almost more neutral kind of way. And so because of that, they can't really produce any. They don't really produce that many. And Tina Amini went over there. She was the editor-in-chief of IGN, and now she's over at Xbox. She worked on I believe it was that ID at Xbox showcase that happened recently. That was, she produced that. So like, you know, I think that there's always room for them to produce more stuff like that. And they seemingly have people in place that like I would put on camera tomorrow. Be like, yes, go interview this developer and put the whole thing up on Xbox and do, you know, Like, make it look like something where you're just like, you're almost running your own outlet, which they kind of do with Xbox Wire. They've got writers hired, like, Will Tuttle, who's, longtime game journalist, has been working at Xbox for years, and his job hasn't changed. He just goes, like, he was taking the same demos at Summer Game Fest that I was, and then he was going and writing about Mortal Kombat 1 for the Xbox blog, or, whatever it is. But how many people see that? You could put all that right on the fucking console. You could put out more podcasts, more video content. I'm just surprised they don't do it. PlayStation, exact same situation. I don't understand why they don't do it. I don't understand why they don't do more of it. I think it would be cool as shit to have that sort of content just exist right there on the console and just be like, hey man, you want this is, and maybe the answer is people just don't want it, or the percentage of people that want it is small enough because most people just want to see trailers, or most people want, whatever else. But like, they have people in place that make that content, and they don't do a good job of surfacing it kind of anywhere. But I think the idea of just like, again, it is that kind of captive audience, and it is that kind of like company store kind of, here's the official word type thing. But like, I do think that the idea of turning on your Xbox and then seeing a show, or being able to see a well-produced show weekly, it's like, hey man, it's Tuesday, the new episode of fucking This Week in Xbox is out, or whatever you end up calling it, right? And really cover, here's literally everything that's coming to the console this week, and we have some highlight showpieces that's just like, hey, we went to this studio to talk to them about Hellblade, or what was it like getting ready for the trailer reveal of Starfield. We asked a couple of questions to Todd Howard, and said like, hey man, what was it like? Hey, you had to produce all this, all this Starfield stuff. Was it, was it fun? It was like a little bit more behind the scenes or something. But like, I think the percentage of Xbox owners that would watch that or really care about something that deep down the rabbit hole is probably pretty low. Maybe that's the problem. Is that for most people, a trailer is good enough, and then they already produced a super well-produced Starfield thing. So no, you don't need to go produce another one that is even deeper down and go like, so you made this thing, cool, huh? Like, so I don't know. But I think that would, when we talk about humanizing developers, which seemed like a very good idea at the time, and now we're at a point where now we've gone and humanized all these developers, and now all they get are death threats online. They stuck their necks out to help educate people about the stuff they're making, and help people learn more about how games are made and all of this other stuff. And what'd they get for it? Fucking death threats because the puddles didn't look good enough, or some fucking horse shit like that. Terrible. Terrible. Anyway, congratulations to Larry for an astounding run. 22 years. It's a very long time to be anywhere. Heck of a run. Big week for news about new versions of old games. In an interview with Blender, a video interview, which is I believe, is this Brazilian? Last of Us composer Gustavo Olaya let slip that an enhanced version of The Last of Us 2 is being developed. That's according to Video Games Chronicle, who is getting that from a Spanish language website called Vandal, but it all came out of this Blender interview. And I guess the idea is here, this is the same composer who worked on the adaptation for HBO and all the other stuff. And he just mentioned a new version of Last of Us 2 is in the works. And I guess the relevant bit here is, according to Spanish language website Vandal, Santolaya, L-A-L-L-A. So that's La Ya. Right? My L's. revealed that a new version of the game is in the works in which players will be able to make him play certain tracks, before adding he wasn't allowed to reveal any more information. So yeah, I don't know. Last of Us 2 remake news seems like very, well, whatever. Is that something people need? Didn't they already? Last of It. So we'll see. I mean, again, this is a composer saying that this thing is happening. When we get to the people that are outside of the game world a little bit, composers, celebrities, the mocap people, you have to take all of that with a grain of salt, because they might not know exactly what it is that they're working on, and they're not giving good details. They're just kind of like, oh yeah, I sat there for a thing. They mocap me for a thing. I guess, I don't know, I'm doing this. So obviously, who knows, right? But at some point, like, okay, do you do a new version of it for PlayStation 5 again? Because they did do that upgrade already. But would they want to remake it specifically for the PS5? And I guess, like, the only reason I can see this kind of making sense is the television show was such a big hit. So the television show was so well regarded that I could see them saying, oh man, we've got to capitalize on this somehow. What can we do that makes this work? So do you have a situation where you, like, do you do The Last of Us 2, the movie, the game, the TV show, the game? Like, do you mocap the actors from the TV show and put them into the game as an option? Maybe you default to that, and then you have the originals in there as an option, or vice versa. I don't know. Like, what do you do to that video game to make it something that people who watch that show buy? Who didn't already buy it, because it's out already. It's been out. It's not the new game. So yeah, do you end up like redoing a lot of the dialogue to have the actors from the television show do that? You're like, is that the best way to capitalize on the popularity of the TV show? Is that something you could turn around relatively near term? There's nothing in here about a time frame, right? There's nothing. He's just saying, and he is just saying that, there's a way you can, because he has a cameo in the game. He already did. And that in the new version, players will be able to make him play certain tracks, is the quote that Video Games Chronicle has here. So was there new music composed for the television show? Do they add that in there? And so there's ways to, is that a thing that they can do? Like, sure, maybe. I'm just trying to think it through and go, like, what would they actually make? Oh, VR. Yeah, Amarola says Last of Us VR. Yeah, what if there was a situation where they did Last of Us for VR? I guess that's a thing you could theoretically do. I, much like Sony, have forgotten that the PlayStation VR 2 exists. But I suppose you could do something like that. So it's, yeah, I don't really know what to make of this, other than, yeah, I mean, the word's been going around for a while that, like, oh, maybe they were going to do a director's cut or some kind of updated version of Last of Us 2 anyway. So maybe this just ties back into that. But I guess I just look at it as, like, what do you do? There is probably some opportunity to better capitalize on the TV show. And there probably is some opportunity to say, like, oh, here's one package, and if you buy this package, you're going to get the director's cut, update, whatever version of the game for PlayStation 5. And you will also get the full season of the TV show streaming as a part of this package. Or I don't know. Do they sell you a Blu-ray? Probably not, right? They could. Maybe they do a fancy box set. But maybe they also just do like, hey, if you buy this version of the game, you can stream episode 1 of this series or something. I don't know. In much darker news that feels like the end of the world is coming our way, Gex is back. They're going to re-release Gex. Maybe it'll come with the Last of Us TV show. Maybe you buy the Gex trilogy and you get every episode of the Last of Us television show. Maybe they could do that. Limited Run Games has made an announcement that the Gex trilogy is coming to consoles and PC. That's let's see here. That's Steam, Xbox, PS5, PS4, and Nintendo Switch. Video Games Chronicle notes that this seems to be coming through Limited Run Games' Carbon engine, which they bill as a development tool that helps create emulation-based ports of classic games for modern hardware. So this does not seem like it is a full remake of the Gex games, but they do have a trailer that, as far as I can tell, this has, like, it's Dana Gould doing the Gex voice for the first time in over 20 years, which is crazy. The Gex games are not good. I don't, they're not. It was an era, It was an era, but man, oh man. Yes. Do we get the UK dubs for Gex 2 and 3 as an option? Let's hope. That'd be a fun little Easter egg or something. I think a lot of people outside of the UK did not know that those existed, and I did not know until I think you told me recently, Bryn, that was happening. But yeah, Gex. That includes Gex. That includes Gex Enter the Gecko and Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko. I have nothing but respect for Dana Gould. I feel like I don't know, like, I don't know how much of are they going to re-record it, or they're just going to use all the same dialogue. I assume they're just going to use the same dialogue, since these seem to be more emulation focused products. Rockbust in the chat says Frank Cifaldi says they're better than Bubsy. That's like, yes. Is Gex better than Bubsy? Yes. Is, that's not yeah. Well, it's not, of course, like, yes. The Bubsy games are not good. Yes. Is it cold? I've been trying to come up. Yes. But every disease that pops into my head is one that is too harsh for me to say out loud. But is having diarrhea better than having cancer in your ass? Yes. Okay. I don't know. Gex is better than Bubsy. That much is clear. And thankfully, they're not re-releasing the Bubsy games. That's going to. I feel like we're entering a dark timeline here, where we're like someone's going to re-release the Croc games. Someone like Croc is going to come back. The Legend of the Gobos will be retold for a new generation. It's going to happen. The Croc games are not terrible, but not worth being re-released. They've not aged especially well. That's right. Yes, Croc HD isn't. Yeah, they already. God. Croc. And now this one, which I don't know what to make of this. This seems like a negative to me, but I don't know. Simone Bailey, who is a actor who appeared in 2005's Need for Speed Most Wanted, posted something on the internet that says, Need for Speed Most Wanted remake is being released in 2024. Like and comment if you want to see Cross, Dean McKenzie, and his partner, Simone Bailey, hunt down the Most Wanted. At EA, at Criterion Games, at Need for Speed, hashtag Need for Speed Most Wanted remake, hashtag Need for Speed, hashtag NFSMW, hashtag NFS, hashtag Need for Speed Most Wanted. 2005's Need for Speed Most Wanted is an incredible thing. Because that is they made people matter in a Need for Speed game when they put Razor Callahan in there. And Razor Callahan is maybe the best. The cutscenes in Need for Speed Most Wanted are amazing because the actor performing the role of Razor Callahan is so fucking over the top. And it's 2005, right? So it's just this kind of tuner culture, like early Fast and the Furious era. And he's amazing. It is the most, hammy, overacted. Like all the cutscenes in that game are so fucking over the top in ways that make it hilarious. Also, the game itself is quite good. It, for its time, it was a hell of a game. It was open world. You're getting away from the cops. A lot of the stuff that modern Need for Speed still does, I just feel like modern Need for Speed does not do it in as tight of a package as that game did in 2005. Remember also that game was like a launch game for the Xbox 360, and so it was one of the standout games at that launch. It was cross-gen. They did do older versions for the other consoles that were not as good. And so a lot of things came together to make Need for Speed Most Wanted, the first one, the 2005 one, because they used the name again years later, which is ridiculous. It was killer. It was a killer game. Right place, right time, right platform. Like, such a fucking good game. And I wondered for years, did they know? Did the people making that game know that it was fucking hilarious? And I eventually, through someone who was at EA at the time, years later, did hear back like, I ran into the person who worked on Most Wanted and asked a bunch of questions. And no, they had no idea. Because, if they knew, if they were deliberately trying to make something hilarious, it probably wouldn't have come out nearly as good. But instead, they were taking that fucking stone cold serious. Pathos. This is our fucking street racing epic. So I don't know. If you remake that game now, I don't know what you do, because obviously they reused the name again in like 2012 or whatever the hell it was when Criterion made, and that's a great game. That's a great game. Very different game, but that's a great game. And so I don't know. Like, if you remake Need for Speed Most Wanted, are you keeping all of the same cutscenes? Because if you're not, then you're shooting new ones. And they've tried to shoot new Need for Speed cutscenes over the years, over this last generation or two, and they've been dreadful. Just miserable. Just joyless. In so many ways. That game that when they rebranded it, I think they just called it Need for Speed, right? I think that's the one I'm thinking of that has all the different career paths, and you hang out with different people depending on what career path you're doing, and like, this guy's the criminal and this guy's the this. Just not fun, not like bad in a good way, not cheesy, not Not mystery science theater-esque. Just fucking bad. 2005's Need for Speed Most Wanted is an astounding achievement in terms of its cutscenes and how those things come across. The post has since been deleted, so I don't know how that happens. You know, like is that, does this actress get word that the game is coming back? How does this actress get word that's coming back? Like, clearly she's trying to start something that's like and comment if you want to see these actors hunt down the most wanted. But like, are you bringing them back for new shoots? Are you know, they did bring back the character of Razor Callahan in one of the mobile games, which almost got me to play one of the mobile Need for Speed games. But like, yeah, do you do animated cutscenes and just bring them back in for their voice? You know, because that'll be, you know, if this game's coming out in 2024, that'll have been 19 years. Since those shoots. I don't know what the actor who played Razor Callahan is doing lately, but do you want to bring him back to try to recreate that specific? I don't even know what you're doing at that point. I don't know. It's hard to know. This is such a weird kind of nothing of a post, but it got deleted, so you assume that some parts of it are true and that is going to be the next Need for Speed game. But that's a hard one. I have a love for that game. That it's the sort of thing where I don't want to go back and play that game, because I know that the game in my head is much better than that game actually was. And I played that. I got almost all of the achievements in that game because that was that era. But you know, I think it would be really hard to go back to that game in a remake type sense, unless you, I mean, if you really remade a lot of it, you could make a more modern driving game. But also at that point, that's what all of the modern Need for Speed games are, is it's just like elements of that blueprint brought forward and made worse. And so the idea of them pulling this back in, and Derek Hamilton, the person who played Razor Callahan's apparently doing a bunch of television shows, which I feel like every time I look him up on IMDb, he is getting steady work in TV, not necessarily like recurring roles. Looks like he was in one episode of Yellow Jackets. But that's a high profile show right now. So, you know, every 2 to 5 years when I go, what's Razor Callahan up to, man? I'm saying that if they wanted, look, obviously nothing but respect for Paul Walker here, but if you needed a character to fit a Paul Walker-like role in your driving to crime syndicate to outer space film franchise, you could do a lot worse than casting Derek Hamilton. You could do a lot worse than casting the actor who played Razor Callahan into that role. I think he could have done that. He could have been Brian's cousin. He could have been, they could have brought him in and had him be a Paul Walker-esque. He could have been the older brother of the guy from Tokyo Drift too. He could have been, there's a lot of, I'm saying there could have been a lot of roles for Mr. Hamilton in the Fast and Furious franchise. The guy from Breaking Bad. I mean, he was in the Need for Speed movie, right? I have fucking managed to memory hole the entire, I think I saw the Need for Speed movie. I'm pretty sure I saw it. I cannot remember a single thing about it. All I can remember is that dude, whatever the Breaking Bad guy, whatever his name is. And you see it in every picture he does now. And so every time I see him in pictures, it all comes rushing back to me that you see him doing that fucking like bend down, like, like he does this in so many photos. It's just like, that he did when he walked out on stage at E3 to talk about the Need for Speed movie. I can't remember anything at all about that. It can't. I know it came out. I'm pretty sure I saw it. But holy shit, like the plot I cannot remember a single facet of what that movie was about. It's got cars. I think I'm a pretty safe bet that they gotta race cars. But I don't know why. Is it an underground street race? Are they running contraband? Why are they driving the cars? I cannot tell you. I don't remember anything at all about the plot of that film. That's probably for the best. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. It's probably about family. Stealing DVD players or whatever. Yeah. What about the what was it called? The movie that DMX was in. Fast and Fierce, Death Race. That's a movie. Apparently came out in 2020. Is that the second one, or is it anyway? According to Variety, DMX plays a sinister mobster who forces a crusty ex-NASCAR driver to compete in the Outlaw 1000, a high-stakes road race from Mexico to LA in order to pay off his brother's debt. That sounds good. Fast and Fierce, Death Race. Again, apparently that came out in 2020. I bet that's great. I want to watch that. I don't see a lot of movies. I have not seen Fast X, or whatever the most recent one is called. Oh man, Jack Tyson is a young man partaking in an illegal Mexico to California car race when a desperate woman, fleeing from her abusive gangster boyfriend who was financing the race, jumps into his car pleading for his help, and who has an incriminating USB drive that could send her boyfriend, among others, to prison. Jack Tyson is played by Michael Dvorzan. Jack Tyson has to race from Mexico to LA with an incriminating USB drive. It's like he's stealing the guy's girlfriend, like Smokey and the Bandit or something. There's no way this movie is not amazing. Maybe I need to carve out a little time for me and catch Fast and Fierce Death Race. On IMDb, it has a rating of 2.3 out of 10, which is probably good. It's probably good. And lastly, in the news, July 15th marked the 40th anniversary of the release of the Famicom. The console that we know here is the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Nintendo Famicom, the family computer. Again, July 15th, 1983. 40 years of the NES. I mean, not quite 40 years here in the States. Obviously, it would not be released in the United States until 85, really more like 86. But, October 85 was its kind of official first appearance in the States. They made it into a little gray box instead of a, red and white kind of top-down jobby. It's we don't really talk about it that much anymore, because it's just like kind of ancient history at this point. But it's easy to forget that. And maybe someone else would have done it. It would have had to have happened eventually, but there was no console industry in the United States anymore until Nintendo brought it back. That business was gone. When we talk about the great video game crash, which is a weird distinction in a lot of ways, but like the Atari 2600 buried the video game industry. It ended the fad. Those were the fad days for video games when people were like, this Atari's blowing up. It's gangbusters. Everyone wants this Atari. To all of a sudden, there are a billion Atari games coming out and they're all bad and everyone is tired of this bullshit and no one really wants to go to arcades anymore. And so that, you know, and the knock-on effects on that happened that you know, kind of in a lot of ways, the exposure, you know, with the way arcades went, you know, it limited the exposure of Japanese games in the US there for a couple of years. But really, you know, and I did not feel it. I did not feel the effects of the crash all that strongly because, you know, in the early 80s when the Atari went away, when the Atari 2600 and ET came out and, you know, like Christmas 82 fucked everything over, that whole business became nuclear. Retailers didn't want to fucking touch it. Like there was so much product being dumped for such a little amount of money because suddenly no one wanted it at all. And the glut of bad late era Atari 2600 games, the ColecoVision, you know, the number of other consoles that didn't really seem to pick up and go anywhere. The retail market wanted nothing to do with any of that shit. Computers ended up filling that gap. And so, you know, as someone who had an Atari home computer, that was a very different business. As someone who, you know, the Commodore 64 was big through that time frame. So depending on what you were playing and what you had, you know, for me, the games never ended because I was still playing a lot of computer games and I just played more computer games in that time frame because there were no console games until Nintendo brought it back in 85. And that gap feels massive when you think about like Christmas 82 to October 85. It's crazy to think that it was really only 3 years. But also when you go back and look at some of the documentaries and some of the other reporting and some of the other things from that era, or really not from that era, but you know, when we look back on that era and you hear former Nintendo people talk about what it was like and how upward of a climb that was to try to get retailers to like listen to a video game company and be like, yes, we want to sell video games again, and having all these cigar chomping sales guys be like, video games are dead. I want skateboards and Rubik's cubes. You know, Nintendo brought that market back in the States. They managed to pull it off. And it's funny to think that the Famicom, you know, because again, it came out here in 85, but that Famicom came out in mid-1983, which feels like a different era. That feels like a direct follow-on. Like you read up on the development of the Famicom and when Nintendo was making it, what they were looking at. And you see that they were looking at, you know, Galaxian, which was a late 70s game. They were looking at Donkey Kong. They were looking at arcade games of that era. They were looking at the ColecoVision is something that I guess they cited as like, you know, we had to make sure we were better than the ColecoVision, which is funny because the ColecoVision seems like ancient history, ancient technology compared to the NES. But when you look at 1983 and, you know, like how quickly the Famicom came out on the backs of some of those consoles, it just didn't come to the US. You're like, oh yeah, I guess it's kind of contemporaneous with that stuff. It's crazy because it feels like such a leap forward. Even when you play early NES games, early Famicom games, all the Mapper Zero stuff that are just like archaic to look at now. Like we were playing Karateka last week on the Famicom. I'm like, ugh, it's rough. But you compare that to like what a ColecoVision could do, or what an Atari 2600 could do, or an Atari 800, you know, like some of those other platforms, you're like, shit, man. This is the future. This is such a leap ahead of those other platforms that were before it. But like they put their heads together, they fought the hard fight, and they brought that industry back. They had to go make a robot and a light gun to make it all. Well, the robot really, the light gun they were doing anyway. But you know, you go and look at Rob the Robot and how they had to kind of say, no, it's a toy. Video games, yeah, you're right. Video games are dead, but this one is a fun robot toy. It also hooks up to a television. It's the newest, latest. Rob the Robot. Without Rob the Robot, you know, would we be sitting here doing this? Probably. I don't know. Like I said, someone else would have eventually cracked the code. You know, if the rest of the world was getting video game platforms, the US would eventually get back on board. But Nintendo did it with the NES. 40 years, well, in the US they did it, you know, 38 years ago, but that platform launched in 1983. And it's crazy. You think about like that, some of those early NES games as being from 83, which, like I said, 83 feels like, you know, it is. It's the 2600 era. And so the idea that those games, that Super Mario Brothers is being released on a platform that was designed to, you know, that was designed and released in 1983, that's the level of hardware they were working with, but they made different choices. Better, different choices were available to them by 83. You know, the 2600 was from what, 77? So obviously technology had advanced and everything there, but like, man, it is crazy to think about that thing was originally released in 1983 and how long it lasted, that, you know, that those games were still coming out into the early 90s before it finally got replaced. It's really wild. You know, I got my NES at the wider US launch in 86, I think is how that went, because I got mine for Christmas and I thought every game was pretty good except for Mock Rider. Mock Rider was the one game we returned. It's between Super Mario Brothers and Commando, because Commando had all the secret bonus rooms that weren't in the arcade game, and so it felt like a bigger, crazier game than even the arcade game was, you know. Just a really neat game. So yeah, I don't know, man. It's crazy to think about. 40 years. You know, maybe that'll be a bigger celebration in a couple of years here when we're celebrating the US launch, but I don't know. I wonder if when we get to 2025, will that be a big deal because it'll be 40 years in the US, but like the 40th anniversary of the Famicom kind of came and went without too much fanfare. You didn't really see, I didn't see a lot of stuff out of Nintendo. I mean, they would have done it in Japan, but I don't know that I saw a ton of big 40th anniversary stuff, but that's a big deal. It's crazy to think, you know, how far it's all come, and how, man, today's video game industry is so crazy compared to even 30 years ago. Forget the early 80s. I don't know anything about that. I found a video, I found it's a public television show where they're following around iMagic, the company that made Atlantis, and they're following them to CES as they're getting ready to start taking orders for the 2600 version of Atlantis. And it's all this really interesting kind of like, it is those cigar chomping fucking dudes in suits going like, I think we can maybe make $50 million. We can get $50 million in orders by Christmas. Like, you know, kind of going through all of that. I set that video aside to maybe watch it later. Maybe we'll stream that. I don't know. Maybe that'd be fun. But yeah, I don't know. I think about the early days of this industry, and I think about the early days. That's a new episode of Game Boys to Men posted yesterday. It's a filthy episode of that show. No two ways about it. We're talking about the formation of the ESRB, which, you know, happened in, you know, in the wake of Night Trap and Mortal Kombat and all of this other stuff. But, you know, because we're talking about the ratings of video games and adult content and you know, that when now all that stuff was happening, I was 19 and Glenn was 18. And so there's just a lot of porno talk, a lot of dirty talk in that episode, in conjunction with, talking about Glenn's brief stint testifying in front of a congressman about video game violence, kind of separately from the Joe Lieberman stuff, which is interesting, and just kind of some of that stuff. But then we talk a lot about dirty rap tapes and German films and so on and so on and so forth. I was reminded a little bit of those days today because there's a story going around saying that in the UK they're trying to form a framework around how to regulate loot boxes. And it sounds very much like the government's coming up with an incredibly generous and loose framework and just saying, like, you need to self-regulate this shit. We think it should be like this at a bare minimum, and if you can't do that, then we will come in and fix it. And so we'll see if anything happens over there with, you know, I know EA just announced its next soccer game and all that shit. All their Ultimate Team stuff is very much at the forefront of a lot of this conversation. So we'll kind of see how that all shakes out. But it reminded me of just like, yeah, all that stuff. We talk about Hot Coffee, the GTA San Andreas stuff, as a result of all the ESRB, everything. Yeah, it's a good time, that episode. We're getting into, we're getting into some weird topics here as we get into the 90s on that show. But yeah, new episode of that just dropped yesterday. Go to patreon.com/Jeff Gerstmann for more details on how you can listen to that Patreon exclusive podcast. It's a fucking banger. That shows a good fucking time. Why don't we get into some emails? Yeah, Bryn says the UK is filthy with gambling shit. It's disgraceful what we allow. The US has gotten more like that, but I remember seeing some of the television commercials for gambling operations and just like the weird, Ladbrokes, like the weird, like, walk into this building and place a bunch of bets and all the crazy shit that happened. You know, we found, it was a couple years, well, I guess 2 or 3 years ago now, that we found the automated dog racing videos there's just a computer infinitely generating CG dogs and then making the dogs race. And then you can bet on the CG dogs. Like, fuck the real dogs or horses. You can just, you know, they can knock out another dog race 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you can bet on it. You just got to hope that the computer that generates the races doesn't know how people are betting so that it can't make sure that it doesn't lose too much money, I guess. That's like video poker, I guess, in a lot of ways. Like, when you're doing real poker, ostensibly, they're shuffling cards in front of you and they're doing stuff. And you go like, well, at least it's real. Video poker, what's happening inside the box? It's just rolling some dice and saying like, no, you lose again, man. Right? That shit ain't on the level. Why would you think loot boxes are on the level when they can't even get the stuff for real money going? Anyway, the stuff that the crazy shit, man, the live streams that Bryn's mentioning a place called William Hill. So yeah, the dog races I think are run by William Hill. The CG dog racing, I think they run that stuff. And they run, it's like there's car racing, dog racing, horse racing, and then there's like soccer games, and they're all like these computer generated. It's just a computer hooked up that just generates this shit. And you can bet on it. I don't, the very idea that you would walk into a corner store and just look up at a TV and watch fake dogs race over and over again, that's how you're going to spend your day. I'm going to get a big bottle of Buckfast and we're going over to the William Hill and we're going to watch these fake dogs run. I assume that's how it all works. I have no idea. You see those other video streams that are like, here's a video stream of a roulette wheel and there's a lady there and she's spinning the roulette wheel and it looks like a real, it's a real roulette wheel. And you can bet on it from around the world. I mean, wherever it's legal, but you get a VPN, you get a fake credit card, you can fucking lose money no matter where you live, I'm sure. Anyway, this is my way of saying I'm moving to Kick. No. I got my roulette wheel off to the side. Trust me, you guys, it's gonna be great. No. Let's get into some emails. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. And you can send in your emails and I will look at them and I will read some of them even, and so on and so forth. We'll start with Steve from Royal Oak, Michigan. Writes in and says, do you think there's any possibility that Starfield exclusivity on Xbox and PC could be temporary? I'm wondering if after a year or two, it might make sense for Microsoft to put it out on PlayStation consoles and hoover up whatever money is left from those folks. Why wouldn't they do this? Perhaps it would set a bad precedent and people would know to wait on Microsoft exclusives in the future. Yeah, no, that's not going to happen. No. Think about all of these decisions around what goes where are really based on what's the way for them to make the most money while also supporting their brand. You could make the argument, and I'm not going to like try to fake numbers on it or whatever, but you could try to make the argument that like they would sell more copies of Starfield if they eventually put it out on PlayStation. To which I would say, yeah, maybe. But that's also a case for them to say, you should come over to Game Pass. And so they lose out on that money, but that's really an investment in their brand. That's really an investment in them going, okay, you should get an Xbox. You should get, or if you have a PC, you should get PC Game Pass. You should get a sick phone and subscribe to our cloud streaming service, whatever it is. You should come over to the Xbox ecosystem. And if you do that, then they eventually make more money off of you that way than if they had just sold you a copy of Starfield over on the PlayStation. And I think that's something that makes sense for single player games. When we start talking about multiplayer games, especially when we start talking about the extremely large and popular multiplayer games, like Call of Duty, it's too much money to throw away. You could make the, because if they did that with Call of Duty, if they said, okay, we're going to pull it off of PlayStation, you got to be on Xbox or PC if you want to play this game. You got to come over onto our ecosystem. Some people would do that for sure, but they make so much. There's so many more sales of that than there would be of like PS5 copies of Starfield. So it just becomes a much more massive number to just throw away like that. So that's why they do that with Call of Duty. If they took Call of Duty off of PlayStation and limited it over to Xbox, that franchise would probably lose so much money year over year. The movement to Xbox would not make up for it. Some people would move, but it would break the lock that Call of Duty has on the multiplayer shooter market, because that would open up room for even more competition from other shooters. It would open up the door for EA, for example, to fucking, try to make Battlefield good again, or, bring back Medal of Honor, because that was always their more Call of Duty-esque shooter. When they rebooted Medal of Honor, remember those weird days when they did that? Or Or hey, maybe Titanfall. You know, maybe it would open the door for a Titanfall 3 to exist. But really, Call of Duty is still so big in the $60 game market, in the kind of non-free to play. They do obviously have Warzone as a free to play component, but they still sell so many millions of copies of that thing, and then they still sell a lot of cosmetics and everything else. It is still too big of a thing for them to walk away from. The thing that I'm a little bit surprised by when they do it is when they take games like, you know, because Minecraft is still a multi-platform game. But what they have done is they've also said, hey, the entire Minecraft family of games is going to still be multi-platform. And so you have a situation where a game like Minecraft Legends, which just came out not that long ago, is also coming out for Switch and for PlayStation 5 and everything else. It is technically a multiplayer game, but it is not actual Minecraft. It is a spin-off in a way that you go like, yeah, you know, if they took Minecraft Legends and it was only on Xbox, you'd be like, all right, whatever. But I guess probably the situation there is like, they have a lot of Minecraft fans on all platforms. And it would behoove them to sell Minecraft where the Minecraft players are. And if those players are on Switch, you got to put the game on Switch. Especially with the Switch owners, because in a lot of those cases, there's going to be younger kids that are not going to be able to force their parents to be like, hey, take this Switch and throw it in the trash so we can get an Xbox, or, you know, or whatever. It's just not going to go down like that. So we still see all these Minecraft offshoots appearing on multiple platforms. And I think that's what they pick and choose based on that. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. I don't think it's any more insidious than that. I think they just look at it as like, as they've acquired some of these franchises and studios, there have been some that have player bases that are massive on other platforms. And they just look at it and go like, yeah, we could make this Xbox only, but that would fuck us in a few different ways. I mean, competitively, you know, if they walked into these court cases and said, we're going to make Call of Duty Xbox exclusive, they would not be buying Activision. That would probably fuck the whole thing over. But just even, you know, even in the absence of the government intervention stuff, like I think you have to look at it and go like, hey, what's the bigger number if we sell this game to everyone, or if we take the hit on the game sales but instead bring some percentage of people over into the Xbox ecosystem? And so they look at that and go like, okay, Starfield's a brand new fucking IP. You know, you could argue that it is the next game from the Elder Scrolls, whatever. But at the end of the day, were those games thought of as massive PlayStation games? They probably did just fine. I mean, I remember Bethesda games on PS3 being thought of as a fucking laughingstock because of how poorly they ran and everything else. So I don't know that they've put their best foot forward onto PlayStation platforms with their games in the past. As someone who played Fallout 4 on a PlayStation 4, it was a miserable experience. When you think of Skyrim, you think of the Xbox 360. You do not think of the PlayStation 3 version of Skyrim. I'm sure that all those games sold fine. Like, yeah, again, you know, but like notorious for how poorly some of those games ran. Absolutely right. So I think in that situation, you're going, oh, we're putting Starfield out, and you don't feel obliged to put it out on Sony platforms because it is such a different situation than some of these multiplayer games that have not been saddled with some of those issues, and also where you're losing a lot of multiplayer revenue, a lot of skins money. You got to get them skins money from them PlayStation players. And, you know, if you did that to Call of Duty, it would fuck up the reputation of that franchise. It would fuck, you know, again, it would remove that franchise from the world of like world-class multiplayer shooters, you know, like whether that's Fortnite or, you know, PUBG was in that position at some point. Like, maybe not, but like maybe Apex you put into that sort of thing. But like, you need to be everywhere. The way Fortnite is, in order to kind of move those kind of numbers. And Call of Duty has been doing that for years, and they've been moving those kind of numbers for a lot of years. They've also been primarily marketed on PlayStation because of the PlayStation marketing agreement they signed in the PS4 era to promote it. So, you know, I just look at it that way. And I think, you know, when Sony looks at Bungie, you could take Bungie and say like, hey man, we only want to put Marathon out on PlayStation. But you would get some people to migrate to PlayStation if you did that, but you would be leaving money on the table because you probably have to look at Bungie's legacy. Someone in the chat says Bungie won't do that. Okay. Sony owns Bungie. If Sony wanted to do that, Bungie would do that. And a bunch of people could quit, but it could happen to them is my point here. But when you look at the business end of this and you look at Bungie's legacy and you look at like, where are Bungie's fans? Who are the people that are fans of Bungie, longtime Bungie aficionados? It's Xbox players. It's Halo fans. And so there's still some camp there, right? I don't know how big. It's probably not as big as it was, but there is probably still a very substantial. I believe the Bungie, the Destiny Game Pass numbers were actually revealed at some point. Then they were quite big, but yeah, anyone that's hardcore into this shit has probably moved to PC by now. But you probably still have quite a lot of people that have an affinity for Bungie that also have an affinity for Xbox. And so I think you're leaving too much money on the table if you took something like Marathon and said it's going to only be on PlayStation. You got to put it out on PC because anyone that really cares about Destiny is probably playing it on PC by this point. You probably have a lot of like lingering Halo fans, or fuck man, you probably even have some like fans of the XBLA Marathon re-releases or something. In a weird way, yeah, we gotta put the new Marathon out on Mac. Yeah, it's gonna run exclusively on Apple's fucking VR headset. They should do that. Wouldn't that be the weirdest thing if they're just like, oh, we're doing a VR version of Marathon, but it's only going to exist on Apple devices because those are our roots. Also, Myth is back, you know, whatever. So I'll be curious to kind of see how all that shakes out, but you know, it's this sort of thing that, you know, Sony, I don't think had government pressure on them to make sure that Bungie's games existed across all platforms. They could have very easily said, fuck this. These are PlayStation exclusives. This is PlayStation. Maybe we'll put it on PC a few years after that if we want, but But I think you got to look at the type of game they're making. I think you got to look at where players of Bungie's games are, and they are spread out across platforms. You would be throwing too much money away, especially as a game, you know, if you think about it as an ongoing service where you can sell expansions and cosmetics and all this other stuff. At some point, you want to get those games, live service games, into as many people's hands as possible, because you're just trying to fucking sell skins, buddy. You just want people to fucking buy the fucking this Marathon runner skin is inspired by Guilty Spark, and we did a cross promotion deal with the Microsoft people because we all love gamers, you know, whatever the fuck. And that's the game they're all playing. You know, when it comes to, you know, why put Call of Duty out everywhere? Because they want to sell fucking Homelander skins to as many different people as possible. And if they limit it to only Xbox, the numbers will be lower. The relevance of the franchise will be reduced. You know? And I'm sure that Sony is looking at the exact same situation with Bungie. And so, you know, I think that those are just like, that's just common, not common sense per se, but like, I think that's the sort of thing that when you're a company in that position, whether it was Sony with Bungie or whether it's Microsoft with Bethesda or Mojang or whatever, Activision, you know, you do have to kind of look at, you know, where are the fans? What do we lose if we pull back on this game on other platforms and everything else? It's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. the reputational hit that they would take. You'd look like a dick when you do it. You're taking something away from players. That is the thing they hate the most. When it was perceived that something is being removed from them, that is the thing that a player base hates the most. So it just it does not behoove them to do any of that, and so it makes sense that they're not going to do it. That's why all the like, oh, there's no guarantee that the Microsoft. What if Microsoft makes a worse version? In fact, I think that's one of the other. That may be one of the other questions. Maybe that wasn't something that came into the podcast email, but someone asked me like, what is preventing Microsoft from making a shitty version of Call of Duty and putting that out on PlayStation? Probably the agreement they signed with Sony, I think, is binding in a way where they're saying, hey, yeah, because that was part of the argument in court. Who does that benefit? If you take one of your largest player bases and put a shit version of the game in front of them, they're not going to go buy an Xbox. They're going to just stop playing that and go find something else. And especially if Sony is there to capitalize on it with a new game of some kind, that would be the smartest thing for them to do. This effectively gives Sony 10 years to come up with something better than Call of Duty and put it out. And maybe they won't want to. Maybe Call of Duty will be on such a great run and making them so much money in PlayStation Plus subscriptions because people want to play it multiplayer, as well as their cut of the skins money. Got to get that skins money. That maybe they'll just be fucking thrilled about it. It won't feel good in some weird way, some abstract way to be like, well, it's a weird that Microsoft now kind of makes the most popular game on our platform. Most years when Call of Duty comes out, it ends up being the number one seller. And it may not feel good to be like, those Xbox fuckers make our most popular game. To which I say, yeah, outdo them. Compete. Go make a better game. This industry, this genre, I'm not going to say industry wide, but like this genre is so in need of another shakeup. The only shakeups come when Call of Duty reboots itself. And those are not the best shakeups. They've been on a good run the past few years. Well, no. Infinity Ward has been on a good run. The Modern Warfare reboot is a good run. Black Ops Cold War, not so much. But what shooters need is something else new. And, you could argue that, like, we're having these weird arguments about Call of Duty in a world where, like, Fortnite and, PUBG Mobile or, like, whatever mobile battle royale game is suddenly the biggest game in the world or whatever the fuck it is. Maybe this argument over Call of Duty's importance is, like, kind of pointless in a weird way anyway. Because what we should really be talking about is however big Fortnite is, or the story was, I don't know if this is true anymore, this might be completely out of date, but the story I always heard is that Fortnite, massive in the United States, massive in English speaking territories, but PUBG, specifically PUBG Mobile, dwarfs it, and that it was massive around the world. Specifically as a mobile game. And so, then we start to back into, Apex was big in Japan. I assume it still is. But you end up in this situation now where you start to then have the larger conversation. And it was something that kind of came up as part of the Microsoft, the FTC stuff, was like Microsoft kind of repeatedly saying like, we need a bigger mobile presence because this is fucked. And so I don't like the sound of that because every time I play a shooter on a phone, I hate it. It's like mushy control. It's designed to be played on a phone. And if you're looking at it through that specific window and that's your only lens, you go like, this is great. We're all having a great time. But I have spent too long using controllers to play games like that to just go like, when I aim down the sights, it just automatically starts shooting. How nice is that? Because I'm playing on a touch screen instead of a controller. You know, like I don't want to play games like that. I don't want to play games that way. And those games will end up being bigger than anything we're talking about. Because everyone has a phone. As Diablo Immortal has proven. We all have phones. It turns out the answer was yes, we do in fact all have phones. And I don't know where all this leads. You know, like again, you know, the sort of weird situation that as we talk about a lot of the stuff around Call of Duty and its popularity, it is through such a specific lens of in the Western world on expensive consoles, this is the biggest game in the world. And then you look at anything larger than that increasingly small pond and you go, yeah, man, I mean, that's big. Don't get me wrong. That's a lot of millions of dollars, but for these phone games, that's why Square says, fuck it, we're making a Final Fantasy VII Battle Royale, because they're like, fuck, there's too much money out there for us to not take a shot at it. So let's take our most fucking famous, well-known franchise that we fully own, because they're not going to be able to make a Kingdom Hearts Battle Royale, as funny as that would be, and take a stab at it. Try to make this mobile shit. And it failed and they shut it down. But you understand why they would take the shot when you look at how big PUBG is around the world, when you look at how big some of those other mobile shooters are around the world. You get why they would do it. So it's funny sometimes, you know, and I think a lot of us, I'm definitely guilty of it, man. I have a very, you know, very Western world centric view of a lot of this stuff, or, you know, Japan's included in there for sure. But like when I think about the traditional console space, I think about that as the thing that matters most in the world, and it doesn't, and it hasn't. You know, we're still in some weird world where someone somewhere is playing Crossfire and loving it. And also Counter-Strike is still super huge on the PC. You know, even if we don't get too far out of our own backyard, Counter-Strike is still a very massive fucking video game. So yeah, I don't know. It's so you end up with that kind of Asian PC market, but also the kind of Southeast Asia phone market and how big that is. You know, eventually everyone's going to have to go chase that. And so how long do you think, and I know I'm like, I've turned that into the last email by talking about this, but like, I don't want to sound doom and gloom about this, because I do think that the market kind of bears out in the end. And, you know, we will have games that we will like to play, people like us, for the foreseeable future. But at what point does that switch flip? And I guess in some parts of the world, maybe it already did, but like, at what point does all of the development money and all of the development resources for these major 7-year games, these massive, you know, all the money that gets dumped into something like The Last of Us, or all the money that gets dumped, you know, $200 million or whatever the fuck it was, you know, however much it was to develop a Halo Infinite, or, you know, even just Call of Duty, when we think about it just as a shooter kind of context, because that's what's popular. How long until budgets for phone games start going in that direction? And they probably don't have to, but like, how long until the efforts and the bets being placed on mobile games become as big or not bigger than the stuff that we see on consoles? And yeah, T Prime brings it up. Isn't that what people were worried about 10 years ago? The idea of, do people even want consoles anymore and all that? Yes. Yeah, we talked about it when the PS4 was coming out, and you know, there was definitely a lot of hand wringing inside of companies like an EA, or, you know, some of these other third party publishers that had to wonder, because all the numbers for phone games around the world were blowing up in such a crazy way that you had to look at it and go like, oh, the kids don't want consoles anymore. The kids just want phones. The kids want a tablet that they can use to play games. Oh shit, the next generation of kids coming of age do not want the thing we're selling. What the fuck are we going to do? We've got to put the thing that we're selling onto the platform they're playing on, which is phones. That kid that was over here playing Fortnite on a Switch, he'd be playing it on a phone if Epic hadn't fucking gone and started fucking around and gotten their game pulled off phones. He wouldn't need a Switch. He'd be playing it on a phone. So that's what everyone was doing before Epic started all that shit. And that kid and his little brother both had Android tablets that they played a ton of free-to-play games on because they were free to play. Because they could just play them. So you wonder, will we have a crossover generation where you've got kids that were raised on stuff like Fortnite that have respect for the controller, that have respect for the dual analog sticks, and will the generation after them not? What will that be the time when we start to really see the console space, the traditional gaming space go away? I don't really know. I don't think that this can last forever, because I think that, again, I think the generational tastes will shift in a way that the idea of spending $600 or more on a box to plug into a TV to play a game to blah blah blah, that's going to just increasingly become a luxury or something, right? And what does that mean for the world of streamers and streaming? I mean, obviously people are increasingly streaming more and more phone games. I spent a little bit of time. I feel like Facebook, the Facebook gaming thing, is all people streaming phone games. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how the next 15 years go. Jimmy Akame says kids still want PCs to be like YouTubers and streamers. Yeah, that's definitely, there's a factor there for sure. The indie horror stuff, like there's definitely, you're not wrong. There's definitely some aspect of that is going to kind of keep fueling interest in some of these platforms for a while. But I wonder, yeah, you say consoles are $500. It's true, but it's not like the good tablets come free with the Sunday newspaper or anything. That's true. I think parents, much like my mom bought the Fairchild Channel F instead of the Atari 2600 because the Fairchild Channel F had math games on it, and the salesman convinced her that it could be educational. I think with tablets, it is a much easier sell for kids because of the other things they can do with them, whether that's video chat or watching hardcore pornography, the important stuff that kids love. No, but like the wider use case of a tablet makes it a much easier sell than a dedicated game console or Switch or anything like that. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, there's definitely, a lot of these kids are using those tablets to watch YouTube people that are playing video games on a PC and have their streaming setups and whatever else. And so, like, it's weird, right? It's not as clean cut. It's easy. You want to go like, oh, well, this is going to happen. This generation comes of age and it all goes away. But it's a weird, it's a muddy road. And I wonder, what will win out. I like video games. I like to play them on controllers. I think controllers are good. I think a mouse and keyboard is a fun way to play a video game, as weird as that is. Like when we really back it up here and really talk about it, playing video games on a mouse and keyboard is fucking strange. It's strange that it's still a thing after all these years, but it works so fucking well and everyone has one. So again, it's that common denominator thing of like, yeah, mouse and keyboard, you got one of those. Use it. But playing games on a mouse and keyboard is unnatural and wrong. And I wonder if there's a generational shift there that will happen or has happened or something. But like for me, it always comes down to the individual game. Like there are some games that I definitely want to play on a mouse and keyboard. I would have never, and it changes. I would have never, ever, ever. If you had asked me, hey man, do you want to play Diablo on a controller? I would have been fucking absolutely not. Are you crazy? That's disgusting. Get that filth out of here. And then Diablo came out for the PlayStation 1. And I was like, this actually works out okay. It's clunky, but it's still very playable. And so when Diablo 3 came out and had full controller support on console, I started playing it there after hours of playing it on PC on a mouse and keyboard. And I was like, this is fucking awesome. This is great. This is in some ways building on the dream of fucking Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance and EverQuest Online Adventures. This is the future we were promised, and it is here. And then Diablo 4 came out, and now they support controllers on console as well. I fucking love. I do not want to play Diablo 4 on a mouse and keyboard. It's filthy. But yes, as Kakaka Curtis says, okay, but can we agree that people that play Civilization with a controller are monsters? Yes. With the possible exception of Civ Rev. If they specifically go and make a Civilization game for consoles, then hey, go for it. But God damn it. It's the crazy thing, right? Is that they proved that Civ Rev, proves you can make a good Civilization game on a controller. But yeah, Sims for Xbox is a great example. There's a lot of clunky shit that barely works on a controller. What was one of those fucking city builders where you're like the island dictator? There's a franchise. It's like they made 5 of them, and I can't name any of them right now. Anyway, when they put those out on Tropico, yeah. Tropico on console was weird. Anyway. It's going to be a weird couple of decades, I think, when it comes to all this stuff, because I think there's a lot of stuff that we view as being just very ingrained to gaming and gaming culture and the gaming business, that I think there are multiple generations coming of age that don't have those hangups or are not tied to those control methods or those platforms in the ways that we are. And it'll be wild to watch. It's hard not to get a little melancholy about it, really, because you start to think about it and you're like, man, I want to be playing video games for... At this point, I don't see myself ever not playing video games. Right? I see it as like, there will always be video games coming out that I want to play, and I will want to play them, and I will play them. And that'll be that. Unless my hands fucking break and fall off, and then I'll be like, well... Now we got to get one of these other controllers to try to figure it out. Well, you start to wonder, like, is this... At some point, will this change dramatically enough that are all of us eventually destined? Because some people make that jump already. Some people made that jump in like shitty, dumb ways where they're just like, video games were better on cartridges. God damn it. And they get all fucking weird about that. In ways that you're just like, fuck off. Okay, sure. But like, will we eventually get to a point where the games that are, the styles of games, like for as much as gaming has changed, I think there are still plenty of constants, right? There's still things that you recognize, and some of them are throwbacks, right? Like, we still see platformers, we still see games involving shooting, you know, for decades and decades and decades. But I wonder, yeah, do we eventually get to a point where phones have taken over and, you know, the majority of resources used to develop video games are being used to develop video games that, you know, that if we saw them today, we would barely even recognize as a video game. I don't know. I don't like to be someone who just like clings to the past as things change, and I hope that things change in ways that are still fun. You know, like I think that gaming on a phone can be fun. It's just specific types of games that I will play there. And I think in a lot of ways, like, yeah, John had mentioned playing Civ on an iPad or something, you know, like, yeah, that makes sense. You know, those style of games find new homes on phones is the thing we've always thought, but it's been slow to take hold. See, Bug Snacks came out on phones like last week. Is that, yeah, no, that's, oh, is this the first time anyone is hearing this? Yes. By the way, Bug Snacks came out. Let me look this up. Bug Snacks is on phones now. Bug Snacks is on the App Store. You can go download Bug Snacks for $9.99. Premium mobile games, a bold ploy. So, yeah, you know, that's kind of cool, but I wonder if that's, is that, I mean, I guess the fact that everyone just typed what as I typed that in maybe says a lot about the word getting out about Bug Snacks on iOS. And also as a $10 game, we don't think, you know, that's not a thing that happens all that often anymore, right? I mean, the premium mobile game. Anyway, yeah, Ridiculous Fishing EX came out on Apple Arcade. I have not tried it yet because I don't want to sign up for Apple Arcade, but I need to play more of it. Also, speaking of Apple Arcade, Air Twister, the Space Harrier style game, is going to come to consoles this November, which is kind of exciting. Anyway, that's going to do it for the show. Thanks, everybody, for coming through and watching. Thanks, everyone, for sending in your emails. We'll do one last one because this will probably be quick. Peter R. writes in and says, I was reading a Penny Arcade book, which collected their comics from 2007, and I read the comic they made about you and the GameSpot situation. I have linked it here on the off chance that you have not seen it. I have seen it. In the commentary added to the comic, they said that they offered you a job after this, but you had already started a giant bomb by that point. I was curious if there was any more to that story, or if they just offered you a job and you politely declined. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, so like that comic strip is what blew that situation up in a way that like that made, like, they posted that, and then the thing they posted along with it was like, by the way, that's real, that just happened. And so for a lot of people, that was the first time. I don't know who told them about it because it hadn't really broken too widely at that point. I know of a couple of people over the years that I've talked to since that have come forward and been like, oh yes, I was the one talking to Valleywag about this, and I was the one doing this. And did they tell me that they were making the comic? No, I didn't. I did not find out until it hit. And so that ended up being the thing that kind of started everything going. People started really freaking out because that story started getting out there, that's what had happened, and that's why it had happened. Like, that comic is fairly accurate, I guess I would say. It didn't go down quite like that, but I do still have that shirt. And I have a copy of that comic strip in the garage. They got one and framed it, or they got one and intended to frame it in the Whiskey Media offices back in the day, back in 2008. They bought a print of it. So yeah, I was talking to a couple of different, I think by the time they reached out, I was already talking to a couple of different people. One of them being Dave Snyder and the kind of Whiskey crew. And then there was another another organization based in the UK that was looking to start say they were looking to find some US gamers. And I was talking to them about potentially starting something as well. But I hadn't really made a choice. I hadn't really, I hadn't necessarily kind of settled on, once I started talking to Dave, like things kind of accelerated pretty quickly. And that was like, this is the direction I need to go in. These people understand, what I'm talking about and what we should be doing next. They have a fantastic group of people, most of whom I already knew, and they were great. They were like, do you want to come work with Sean Kuntz? I'm like, yes, I do. Yes, absolutely. And so, there was a period there where we were working on stuff and hadn't gone public with it. So I was just quiet. And eventually I ended up appearing on G4 on XPlay. I guess maybe it was a web thing. Maybe it was not actually on the TV show, but I ended up doing an interview with Sessler, and that was the day we launched the blog, maybe, or maybe I just gave the name of the site at that point. But I ran into Sessler at GDC and I said, yeah, we're working on something. We got something. And I said, if you want to, I forget if he asked or he said, if you want to come announce it on the show, I was like, yeah, absolutely. So when the time came, I said like, hey man, let's fucking do this. I remember running into someone else, at GDC that year, who said, oh, are you up to something? I said, oh yeah. I said, I hope it's not launching another video game website. And I just got a laugh that said, well, it's going to be launching another video game website. So, but yeah. So anyway, the other people I was talking to ended up getting super pissed. Even though we were having what I felt it was almost like dating or something. It was like, we were not having exclusive conversations about what I was doing next. We had some loose talks about, yeah, I don't know, maybe we do a website with some news. And I'm like, yeah, I guess. But the thing that blew that up was actually I appeared on an IGN podcast, and there was an offhand remark I made. Literally after that podcast, I drove to Sausalito and met with the entire Whiskey team for the first time. I recorded that podcast. No, I'm sorry. That's not quite. When Neha brought me on whatever that Revision 3 show was, Neha Tawari invited me to come on a show, and I said, I can't talk about anything. She said, no, just come and do it. It'll be fun. Like, you don't have to fucking talk about it. And I was like, and I went on whatever that Rev 3 show was that she hosted. And then from there, Dave called and said, hey, come by. And I was like, oh, cool. I'm in San Francisco already. So I'll just drive through and stop off. And then I met with them for the first time. And when I went into their office for the first time and saw what they had and saw what they were working on and all of that, and saw who they had, I was like, man, what a cool group of people. And so that kind of became the big front runner at that time. But I was still having these kind of, I had loose conversations with this other group. And then I did an IGN podcast, and then on that IGN podcast, they asked like, oh, what are you doing next? And I said like, oh, I don't know. I'm gonna talk to some old friends, like whatever else. And that immediately turned into like rumor, blah, 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 blah. Everyone was convinced I was getting back together with Vince Brody, who was one of the founders of GameSpot, who left to go to Yahoo, and he had just left Yahoo like that week or something. So everyone was like, oh, he's gonna there. That's what they're doing. And then I got a super angry email, even though I hadn't really made decisions of going any direction, really. I just kind of was like, I'm talking to some people, talking to some old friends. Like, it was very non-committal. Like, this guy wrote in a super angry email, said, I hear you're working with Vince Brody. Why are you wasting my time? Like this super angry fucking email from this guy. And I was not working with Vince. I was, I had not, like, all the rumors were false. I was approaching a point where I was going to make a decision here, but it was not made at that time. This guy wrote this scathing, like, forget it. You're, and I was like, and at that point I was just like, okay. because I couldn't, I didn't want to come out and say that I was with this other crew because they were all ex-CNET, and so they didn't want anyone at CNET to know, like, hey, we're launching a game site, hey, we're coming at you, hey, we're the ones that are gonna fucking launch this shit. Like they weren't ready for any kind of heat on that front yet. And so it just sort of, so I couldn't respond and say, no, that's not true, I'm actually doing this. It was instead just like, okay, thank you. And I just kind of didn't acknowledge that part of the email one way or the other. I don't think I said, okay, thank you, but I was like, okay, well, if you feel that way, then okay. Very weird, felt very weird. And then sometime after that, Penny Arcade hit me up. This was like months after that comic. It's not like the comic strip ran and they were like, hey man, come work with us. Because at that point I had 0 prospects when that thing launched. So like I maybe would have done it if they had done that, but, simply because it would have been the only offer, that I had at that time. They would eventually launch what thing that they launched with, Ben Kuchera. And Ben ran a blog with gaming news. And they eventually shut it down. I know Ben has had some very not nice things to say about his time there. I don't know any of those folks all that well. Jerry, I respect the shit out of him. He's, like the stuff with PAX and everything that he's built. The fact that there is still a Penny Arcade after all these years is fucking amazing. And so, I can't knock them, man. They're getting it done. But I would not have been all that interested in, do they own PAX? No, they sold PAX quite a long time ago, is my understanding. There was a brief period of time that I was like, wait, they sold PAX? Maybe we should try to become the people that dictate the content at PAX. Maybe that would be fun, but nothing came of that. But because they had an agreement in place where they sold it, but they were still on board to manage some aspect of it, from a content perspective or something. Like they would book, they still do the things that they do at PAX, right? They host it. Yeah, that's what it is. But I would not have wanted to do the thing that Ben Kuchera ended up doing, like running a blog and writing game news. Like that wouldn't have not been fulfilling for me. And so like if they had said, hey, we're thinking about starting this, I don't think that would not have been super up my alley, right? For me, it would have been, and I don't, maybe they would have been up for more because like I had a different skill set or whatever, but I was very much like, there needs to be podcasts, there needs to be this, video has to be this, like a lot of the rough sketches of what content on that website needed to be, I already had in place. I already had a good idea of what I wanted that to look like. Before I had agreed to do much of anything. It was really just like, is that available? Is that something that's out there? Because the first couple of things I got offered were way more like news, run a news site. And I was like, I can do that. Like at some point I got to fucking pay my bills, but, that's not, I don't think that's the right move, but maybe Penny Arcade, because it would have taken a much larger investment, right? I mean, the Penny Arcade thing was like, it was one guy writing a blog for a long time, and I don't know if he had freelancers or whatever, but like that would have needed to be something much different. That would have needed to be a much larger and more expensive operation to run. And I don't know if they would have been up for that or not. I know they were doing pretty well at that time, but I don't really know what their situation was, but that's the long and short of it. It didn't really go anywhere. They hit me up. I was already committed, and I said like, thanks, but I'm already working on something. And pretty much that was that. So, And now, you know, like, you know, Penny Arcade, I think people still think of it as like a web comic or whatever, but like they're doing all their D&D stuff, like their D&D streams and everything. Like they have found their way into an audio video show, you know, streaming thing in a way that, you know, in a way that kind of everyone else did. So, you know, that's how they've evolved too. So that's kind of funny in its own weird way. But yeah, no, that it is true. And in fact, they did, Jerry did send me an email and I did write back and I thought it was very nice. It was nice. But yeah, that's going to do it for the show. That went long. I thought that was going to be a short email, but there you go. I'm trying to push this button here. That's going to do it for this week. I'm just going to be back on Wednesday. Be back tomorrow to stream some games. And then, like I said, got family stuff happening for the rest of the week. So you won't see me on Friday. But I will be around tomorrow and we'll see. I don't know what we'll play. Gex. No. Never. Maybe we'll play some Xenotilt or something. We'll futz around with some games and see how it all goes. In the meantime, you know, go play a Famicom game. Go play a 40-year-old Famicom game. Go find a 1983 Famicom release. Donkey Kong Jr. Math. That weird Popeye game designed to teach English. Go play some of that. Go play some Mapper Zero games and experience the magic. We'll be back. See ya.